that felt good. That was like all at one time. I'm used to like sounding like firecrackers going off. That was
We're coordinated.
Yeah, that feels nice. All right. Hello and welcome to Radio Free Nintendo. It is April 13th, 2023, and this is episode 818. I am your host, Jam Jones, and I'm joined today by Mr. Greg Alehi.
Ahoy, ahoy, everyone.
And everyone else has abandoned us. This is week 2 of Guillaume's Spirit Quest, and John just told us, I'm not here next week, and offered us no explanation, so I'm going to assume he's out there to fuck with Guillaume's Spirit Quest.
Sorry, he's going to show up with some eagles and save the day at the end.
In their mouth, I assume, is what you're suggesting. I just imagine he's now like fully camoed like Predator, just stalking Guillaume in the woods.
Schwarzenegger when he realizes that the mud can camouflage him from the Predator.
Yeah, exactly. Somehow. He's just out to disrupt Guillaume's Spirit Quest that he's not actually on because he's bought into the canon. But that's all right, because we have 2 guests this week because I'm a host. First off, we have the returning Mario Party. What's your current Mario Party champion status, Xander?
Oh, you mean like what my streak is, or how many I've won?
How you been doing?
Well, I haven't come in 4th place in a while, so I suppose that's kind of a win.
Haven't had to play dinosaur game?
Not yet, but arguably you could say I am subjecting myself to playing Mario Party on a regular basis.
So you're all losing.
So we're all really losing, right?
Yeah, this is Xander Morningstar. I guess you are now technically formally of Nintendo World Report.
Yeah, I pretty much show up for Mario Party, and then that's about it.
Yeah, it's the soft retirement that affects so many of us as we try to disengage from this site.
Yeah, you guys have put in a lot more work than I have, and so if I quit early, my retirement is just having to play Mario Party instead of enjoying other Mario games.
Yeah, you're actually paying a lot harder than you really need to. Speaking of the all-time champion of the soft retirement, we are also joined today by Dr. Jonathan Metz, former host of Radio Free Nintendo, former director of NWR, and how many years were you retired but still working on the site? 10?
Yeah, at least, yeah. Is it really me, though, or is it an AI doppelganger?
I don't know. What's the email address?
Oh, it's rfn@nintendoworldreport.com.
Shit, he was really confident about that. I don't know.
I made the address.
I didn't detect any intransigence or indignity at being asked. I find this potential.
This is a service I can provide.
Potential AI.
Can the litmus test be like me bringing up skeletons and seeing how you guys feel about that, and then if you get into a fight?
The problem is being excited about the presence of skeletons in Nintendo games is now like corrupted. So at this point, if anybody writes us an email about bones, I'm just going to start like vibrating until I cause some kind of interdimensional rip. It's now like in the RFN joke canon, much more so than calling Johnny Horseboy, which I don't even know where that came from.
Yeah, I don't either.
Just fuckery. Just absolute buffoonery at that portion of the audio. But yeah, and like I'm very excited at the prospect of us anytime Bones just happens to come up, like when I buy a Sega Saturn to play Mr. Bones, just for the purposes of making the joke, which is not something I would ever do as I stare directly at the Virtual Boy I haven't touched in a decade.
Was Dr. Dry Bowser a thing in the Dr. Mario world?
Oh, yes, it was actually.
Yes, sadly he was. Yeah. He was one of the few I think I was able to get.
The AI versions of us must have really lost their shit when that happened.
I think I lost my shit when that happened. I think that was in the article. A very serious, not in any way, shape, or form self-serving article I wrote about that game.
I know we didn't plan it, but Dr. Mario World coming up on a podcast that I happen to be on, it feels like it's like a curse.
Oh yeah. So I think this was the last time you were on, we talked about your attempt to beat all of Dr. Mario World before it turned off.
Yeah, you did.
Which, ill-conceived, I'm going to go ahead and say it.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did that go?
I got about 3/4 of the way through before I literally just ran out of time. Like I wasn't able to finish because of that stamina meter, and there was no way to replenish it because they turned off the premium currency. Not that I would ever, but
I feel like if they're going to turn off the premium currency, they should have turned off the stamina meter.
Yeah, that was seemed like a small oversight, but no, they did not.
Just let people see the game. Whatever. Dr. Mario World is a baffling product in many ways.
Yeah, there were about 1,200 levels or so, and over the course of the 4 months, I think it was about 4 months, I went on that journey. I think I got around 800, 850, somewhere around there. I'd have to check my log, which is a sad thing I still have.
Well, again, as somebody who would never do something self-harmful just for the purposes of the show, I see my Wappy dog also over there sitting directly next to the Virtual Boy. So everything's fine and normal here. Speaking of fine and normal and strong business decisions, both Xander and Jonny have seen the Mario movie. And to be honest, it's quite likely that nobody who's normally on RFN will go to theaters to see the Mario movie. So I kind of wanted to hear their take on it so we could discuss it a little bit. And I've got some questions, I guess.
Sure.
But I guess starting out, what was y'all's opinion on it? How did you feel coming out of it?
Better than I was expecting, really. I mean, when they announced that they were doing a Mario movie years ago, I was very, I don't know, I think many people felt the same, and they were just kind of worried about what that could look like.
Circumspect?
Yeah, Nintendo getting involved with Hollywood, what would the movie influence what the games are going forward, all those kind of vague questions that float through your mind. But I saw it on Easter, and before I went to the movie, I actually volunteered to help out with a children's classroom, and 38 third graders told me that they loved it over and over and over again. So I thought, if I don't like this movie, then clearly it's the
children that are wrong. Yes.
Yeah, it's the children that are wrong. But seeing it on Easter was actually very appropriate because, my goodness, this is like Easter egg hunt the movie. If you're a Mario fan or just a Nintendo fan, you're listening to this podcast, you're probably going to get something enjoyable out of just the sheer amount of things that they reference in this movie, from Nintendo's Hanafuda days all the way up to Bowser's Fury, I think was the most modern reference that I spotted. But to go through each reference would be an ill idea for this podcast, just because that I think is the biggest enjoyment in the movie. But just to kind of put it in perspective, in one shot, Luigi has a cell phone that is, I think, the cell phone from Mario and Rabbids. The ringtone for it is the GameCube startup sound, and the caller ID is a Mii, and that's only in one shot, and that's three different things. Yeah, it's like that level of referential material.
Density.
Yeah, very dense.
Yeah, dense is the word that I would probably use too. I mean, it's also. I mean, it is. It's a fun movie. I enjoyed it too. It is not great art. I don't think. I never expected it to be.
Can a Mario movie make you cry? Is the question.
Did not make me emotional at any point. I have to say, it did not make me think about who Mario really is, or what's. Just there's not really anything to ponder here. It is, in a lot of ways, it follows a fairly typical formula for these kids CG movies, but I think it's better than most of those, and I'm glad to see that it's being more successful than most of those too, because I think it is higher quality than something like Minions. I've seen a Minions movie. It was pretty hard to sit through, honestly. I mean, it was amusing once or twice and annoying more often than not. And I kind of feel like the Mario movie did not annoy me. Sometimes it had me scratching my head a little bit, what, do we need the first 10 minutes to be set in Brooklyn in the human world? That actually made me think a lot of the 1993 Mario movie.
Oh, no.
Because the opening, I enjoyed the intros are kind of similar. Until you get to the Mushroom Kingdom, and then they diverge very, very extremely. For me, it's really the story is not anything particularly interesting one way or the other. But I thought the characterizations were generally very good. The voice acting, the animation, just the look of the characters, I thought, really, really came through, and in a lot of cases was just more detailed and kind of nicer looking than what you've seen in the games. And that's true for even very minor characters, little enemies, the little bats that fly around, and the Koopa Troopas and so on. So, and then just the density of the art direction. And I wondered if that's really where Miyamoto had his hands in the honey jar a lot, and really got involved there, because there's something about the imagination of the way the scenes are arranged, the way the characters are arranged, the scope and the scale of the action scenes, and the way that you move through these environments in a way that I don't often see in animated movies, where they just really don't reuse background material or characters, really. So it feels like you're always somewhere new, doing something new, seeing something new. And so it does feel like they just focused on packing as much as they could into the movie. So it's very dazzling. It's very frenetic. Sometimes it's kind of chaotic, but at the end I felt like, wow, I saw a lot of Mario. I saw a lot of the Mario universe, in a single movie. And there are a few stones left unturned that they could explore for sequels. But you have to say, for this being the first movie in what has surely become a big franchise, they packed a lot more into this than they probably needed to. And it does leave you feeling sort of fulfilled aesthetically, So I found it quite pleasing from that standpoint.
Yeah, it's very fastly paced. There were parts where I was like, wow, I wasn't ready for you to jump from that scene to the next one. Like, we're already done with that. And which I think that's a good sign, when you're craving a little bit more. Even when the credits rolled, I was like, I can't believe it's over already. Like, I could have done for maybe another 20 minutes of that, which for someone who was so uninterested and unsure about this movie, I think it's a great sign for what could come. But I think that no matter what, James, you're going to get some enjoyment out of this film, because there was a serious lack of Mario Sunshine. I didn't see one single reference to that amazing video game.
I mean, because all of the Isle Delfino residents have been depopulated, which is the only just outcome for them as a species.
Yeah, but it's a very good time, and it sticks pretty true to, I think, what you associate with Mario. They really haven't changed very much, with the exception of the princess, who is like night and day different from how she's depicted in the games. She's not the damsel in distress. She is much more of the when she's like a playable character. She's a part of the team, which I really prefer. That I think it's pretty cool when you get to play as the princess in the games, and so having her as like a part of the team was pretty cool. And then, you got all your other characters. You got Mario, Luigi, Bowser. I think Kamek was a pretty big underdog for the whole film. Like, I would like to see more Kamek in a sequel. I think a lot of people were pretty worried about the voice cast. That was a big hot button topic when it was first announced. But to be honest with you, I didn't think anything was bad. I think it varied from this is serviceable to this is really funny. Chris Pratt in particular, I know a lot of people were hating on him, myself included. I wasn't really sure if I would like his performance, but he didn't really steal the show. He also didn't distract from the film. After like the first 10 minutes or so, I was pretty fine with it.
It's underplayed.
Yeah, absolutely. He doesn't really play up the Italian accent. He kind of leans into, sometimes he's like from New York, and sometimes it's just Chris Pratt talking. The one who I don't think talked any different or didn't put much into the voice was Seth Rogen. And I watched an interview with him, and he said that like he's not a voice actor, so he was kind of surprised when he was asked to do that role, because he didn't really have a voice for the character. And I think that it made me think that they picked him because they wanted Seth Rogen's voice to come out of Donkey Kong. One of the jokes in the movie is like the Seth Rogen like laugh, and it's just Donkey Kong doing that laugh, and they all kind of stare at him, and it's like that's his laugh.
I got a big laugh from me, actually, because I I just appreciated that they just left it in there unadulterated like that.
Right.
They animated Donkey Kong's face to make Seth Rogen's stupid, shitty laugh come out of it.
Yeah.
Oh God.
It's exactly what you think it is too, which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
I was surprised. Oh, actually, I can't say I was surprised. I wasn't displeased, but they include a lot of licensed music in the movie, which is it's par for the course for Illumination.
Illumination special, yeah.
It's not bad.
Cheesy.
It's just it's very cheesy, and you kind of wonder you have they have some really good reorchestrated music for the film, and it's just surprising to me that they put in as much as they did. There's a sequence where they're building the Mario Karts and they're playing AC/DC's Thunderstruck, and you're just like, okay.
All right, I'm just gonna ask: is I Need a Hero in it?
Yep, that's in there.
Fucking of course it is.
Take On Me's in there. I Need a Hero. Thunderstruck. It's one of those 80s songs. It's probably in there.
Yeah, that's very unnecessary. I will say that I've been listening a little bit this week to the official soundtrack, which is on Spotify and other services. And the orchestral arrangements of the original Mario music are pretty wonderful. And it's not just rearranged. It's an original score that is based on, it is an adaptation of the original Mario music, but a lot of it is just, it's movie score stuff that is an expansion on the the melodic themes. And then often they'll, at the end of the piece, they'll end with a little, one instrument soloing for 2 seconds that plays just a little riff of the original music. And you're like, oh yeah, that was in there the whole time. That music is done really well. And I don't think it's highlighted especially well throughout the movie. I wasn't able to really appreciate it until I listened later.
Yeah, I'd agree. And there's actually a few songs on that soundtrack that they cut from the movie. There's specifically a Donkey Kong Country track that plays. You can kind of assume it's supposed to play when they're entering the Donkey Kong world of the movie, and it's replaced by a licensed song when you actually see the film. Which it's just it's just disappointing because I really liked the music, and it was just oh, you could have thrown that in there, but they chose not to, which that's their prerogative. I was surprised that the Donkey Kong portion was a little downplayed. There is the sequence you've seen in the trailer where they're kind of fighting in a Smash Brothers style arena, but most of the Donkey Kong portion felt like it was more about Mario Kart than it was about Donkey Kong Country. It just so happened to be that all of the characters that were there were the Kongs. So there's been rumors that they're doing a Kong spin-off, and if so, this is enough, I suppose, to introduce that, and then they could really get into all the jungle hijinks, if you will, in that. But it's a pretty good time, honestly. I walked out of that theater being wow, I can't believe I just saw a Mario movie, and I actually really enjoyed it. It feels like a thing that's been building up for so many years, and I'd recommend it.
Xander, you in particular have I don't know the best educational background to critique the work done here.
Mm-hmm.
How would you say the actual technical component of the art and of the movie and how it animates and all that stuff? How would you actually kind of review that as through the lens of somebody who actually is trained in this space?
Well, for me, my background, it comes from animation. That's what I've got one of my credentials in. So when I'm watching an animated movie, it's kind of something that I pay attention to, because the people that work on the movie that I guess I relate to the most are the animators, and so I'm looking at the character movement specifically. I'll be honest with you, I really would like to watch the movie again, because as much as I enjoyed it, the Easter eggs were a little overwhelming. Yeah. And I often found myself distracted about what was actually happening, and I'm more just oh my gosh, did you see that in the background? Did you see that? It's a lot, guys. So I'd like to give you more examples of things that I saw, but really it's just I was just wowed at the Easter eggs the entire time. I did notice that compared to other Illumination movies, it seemed like the people that made it they probably were Nintendo fans. I think coming from the industry, you'd be hard pressed to find anyone that's not involved in the 3D animated environment to not be a Nintendo fan. So I'm sure that the people working on it were ecstatic to find out that was their next project. Yeah, they put a lot of great care into it. There's a sequence in the very beginning of the film where they recreate the 1-1 level from the original Mario, but it's in Brooklyn. And so like they move the camera in a fashion to kind of match what it would look like in the games, and then they do the parallaxing and they follow the camera along as Mario and Luigi kind of recreate the scene. Because I don't remember why they're like late for the bus or something like that. But it was neat to see like that type of the illuminations, very over the top expressions recreated in like a video game style, because it's not a video game, it's a movie. So they had to take like the animations of Mario and Luigi's move sets that you would see in the game, how they wind up their jumps and how they land if they do like a certain type of stomp. They have to do that, but they also have to make those movements a little more exaggerated. So it's not just that they in video game animations, you want them to be very responsive. The moment you press a button, you want the animation to perform the movement, but you don't want it to be too decorative. You don't want it to make it feel like the game is floaty. So I think that they had a little bit of leeway there. They were able to take some of the animations from the games and exaggerate them. So, when Mario would jump, it's not just like he jumps. He kind of does the squash and stretch and winds up. They added some flair to it.
Play to the back of the theater kind of flair?
Say that again?
Like to play to the back or the back row of the theater?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And, yeah, I would say that they basically took a lot of the moveset moves whenever they're doing anything action-related and decorated them a bit. There's a lot of focus on the power-ups in this movie. You've got the cat suit, the fire flower, and the way that they are able to operate with that. That kind of adds to... I hate saying moveset because it's not a video game, it's a movie, but like that's really what they're basing it off of. There's a sequence there where they're like in a training course and they perform all the moves that Mario does in the games, but they're doing it like in a training course context. So I just kind of felt like when they were thinking of how to make the movie, they had to take a list of all of Mario's actions, and then they had to pick and choose which ones they wanted to kind of have him perform. But it was pretty cool to see them realize. I'm trying to look at my notes here to see if there's anything else worth mentioning. There is a character named Spike, but I am remiss to say that it's not the Spike that you know and love.
Which you don't know is the actual thing.
Okay, well, this one might be lesser known than the one you don't know, if that's even possible.
This is the Wrecking Crew Spike, correct?
This is indeed the Wrecking Crew Spike, yeah.
The real Spike.
One more thing I wanted to add, and this is not any kind of story spoiler for the movie, but during the introduction or during like the pre-roll of the movie, when they're doing corporate logos, the Illuminations logo scene involves a minion driving off in a Mario Kart. And I immediately knew that a minion is going to be added to the Mario Kart 8 DLC in these next couple of packs.
Oh, God.
So I'm just going to break that news for anybody who hasn't seen the movie yet. I'm very grateful that minions do not factor into the movie proper, but it seems inevitable they will factor into Mario Kart based on that.
Does that mean we can have a licensed minion driving around in a licensed Mercedes on the, I don't know, what would be the most appropriate track?
I just hope they don't do a Minions track. I can't handle that.
Baby Park, all blue shells, all minions. Let's do it.
I'm actually down for all blue shells items as high as you can make them. Just make it a nightmare.
New 250cc class just for that particular track.
400cc.
I'm actually glad you brought up the blue shell. Not to speak to that specifically, but it made me realize a point that I had skipped over was that they don't explain anything in this movie. And while I guess I'm biased because I'm familiar with all of the content, so I was okay. But if you are someone, maybe you're a parent and you don't play Mario, but your kid does, and you want to take them with you, you're gonna have a good time because maybe seeing your kid smile, it's a reward in itself. But you're probably gonna be a bit lost. Like, they don't explain the concept of what a blue shell is or what it does. It's just like it's a thing that happens, and so it's like, why did that happen? What was the point of that?
So the good news on that one, though, is that if you have like young kids, at this point, a lot of this Mario content's been around so long, you probably know it from your childhood.
Yes.
Absolutely. And like I said, they don't hold back. There's a lot of references to the arcade and NES era specifically. I don't want to give a bunch of examples, but like, it's not just modern Mario. It is adults who have a familiarity with the franchise can get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I would expect that's part of why it's doing so well in the box office, is that you have a lot of people like me. I went with an adult friend who's the same age as me, and we just went to go see it, and that would not happen for the next Despicable Me, right?
Right.
So I think this just has a multi-generational appeal, and they knew that when they made it, and they did pretty well catering to that. So I'm glad that it doesn't over-explain itself. It really doesn't need to.
Yeah, there were more adults in the theater than there were kids in the theater that I went to.
I kind of wondered when we get the readout on what the breakdown of the audience is, because that does come out at some point, but it's not quite as quick as like box office numbers. I'll be curious what the share was of that. Like how many people were childless adults going to that movie compared to other similar content fare.
Yeah, I'd like to see that breakdown too. One thing that kind of touches on Jonny's sentiment about the Minion is that I didn't really see a lot of Illumination's hand, I suppose. Like it's a movie they made, obviously, but it didn't necessarily feel like a movie I would expect from them. And it is a collaborative project between Nintendo and Illumination. But like if I were to watch that in a vacuum, I probably would have said it was more of a DreamWorks movie if they didn't include all that licensing material. Some of the jokes land, but like there aren't really fart jokes in this. There were no Goombas twerking, as I was afraid there were going to be.
Come on, it's 2023. They'd be hitting the gritty, please. And that was kind of the fear, was when it was Illumination. And this is from somebody who doesn't have kids. I've always kind of viewed them as like the third tier of these shops that pump out CG movies.
Yeah.
Because like they are very predicated on, I don't want to use the word lowbrow because it's for kids. Kids find farts really funny, and look, sometimes fart jokes are funny. It's the volume of them that kids can consume and still laugh at them. That is
sure.
Is like a well-placed fart joke is still funny. But with kids, like the 40th fart joke is the funniest one yet.
Right. It's an exponential thing for sure. And,
right.
Illumination isn't just the Minion movies. Dr. Seuss is another pretty big component of their animation studio.
And some of those are pretty good, and some of those are like,
They're fine. It's I kind of remember liking the Grinch one, but the thing with the Dr. Seuss movies that I remember the most is that the humor is caught up in whatever the current trend is, and I don't remember that ever showing up at all in the Mario movie. Do you remember?
They feel like dated?
Yeah, there are no TikTok dances that are going to show up in this movie that I remember. I said, it went by right. It went by so fast. It's kind of like I hope I didn't miss anything, and maybe they did sneak something in there. But the thing that stood out to me the most was the music.
Yeah, like that does feel a very Illumination play. Like they wouldn't know what to do if there weren't at least 6 licensed songs that you expect to be in an animated film.
Yeah, you can argue like Donkey Kong. He's kind of a performer in the movie. He's which I think kind of matches the character. So it's like you could say, oh, that's kind of Illumination, tweaking things. But it's like, well, he is a bit show buddy. He likes to kind of be the center of attention. I feel like that's a natural evolution of the character of Donkey Kong, sure. But no Goombas twerking.
I don't know if I'm happy or sad about that. Part of me like wants that like worst case scenario to pop up for at least a moment, so you can just look at it and feel like, oh, I'm alive still. Okay, like that. I can still feel pain. There it is.
We'll have to move on from the discussion, but that part that I mentioned a moment ago, like that might be something that you're interested in.
Oh, I can still feel pain. Okay, good.
Yeah,
good to know.
There is one maybe a little drop of that's just waiting for, they wanted to please everyone, and so they took some creative liberties for sure.
Oh boy. I did have one thought. We talked about it before the show. I can't remember who it was said it, but they basically left no stone unturned in terms of content inclusion, or very few of them.
I would say there are I agree. I did not notice anything directly from Sunshine. I would say there are some classic Mario villains who do not make an appearance. So I have to imagine that's where they're going in the future.
Yeah, it's crazy how much they reference, but also like when I walked out, I was like, you just kind of like did a montage. It's like there's so much untapped potential here for what you like. James, you were talking about like, you saved the stuff for the sequels. It's like they kind of have in some way, but they did go through a lot in this movie. And not just Mario too. It's a lot of Nintendo history as well.
Like, because my thinking when they originally announced it was like, oh, we're gonna get like a Donkey Kong tease at the end for the sequel. And but they wouldn't show you what the Kongs are going to look like, because that would be like the big reveal of the second movie. Like that would be the PR, like when they're ready to pull the curtain back on the PR. It's like, and here's Donkey Kong's design, but nah, he was right in the first trailer. There it is, bang, out the door.
Yeah, it's funny, and okay, I know people who are listening, maybe they're spoiler sensitive. I'm not really considering this a spoiler. Johnny, we talked about this before the show. They do tease, they leave it open-ended, they tease a sequel, and they do that. They tease a character that could show up in the sequel, but it's like, in such a Nintendo way, it's a weird way they do it, because it's a character you've already seen, and so it's like, why are you teasing the reveal of this character when we've already seen them? So I don't know. It's a bit goofy.
I am merely, like Mario Kart also could have been another movie. I am merely suggesting that my business acumen clearly outstrips the people who made this movie. Was it up to about $310 million?
Biggest animated 5-day opening ever.
Yeah. I mean, so it's clearly like I as J&J always am available even without the other J. To turn your $310 million opening into a $510 million opening. I'm simply saying I am here.
I loved Jack Black. Bowser was a huge highlight for the movie. He ranges from, if you saw the first reveal trailer for the film, he ranges from that kind of all-powerful menace to Jack Black being himself. And I think that kind of matches the side of Bowser when he's depicted to be kind of a goofball dad type. And it was kind of fun to see it played out in that sense.
Yeah, I am very hot and cold on Jack Black, but I do feel like he has the best vocal performance here. With that said, there's a song in the middle of the movie that he does that is the most Jack Black thing you could imagine. And I saw news headlines a couple days after I saw the movie saying, guess what? That song is going to be eligible for the Oscars.
Oh my gosh.
And I just thought, if this song gets nominated for the Oscars, it says a lot about the rest of the songs coming out this year.
I agree.
It's really not anything amazing, but it's very Jack Black.
He certainly put on a performance when he was playing Bowser as scary. He kind of had a little bit more gruffness to him, and I enjoyed that. I didn't mind it when he was just kind of talking like Jack Black, but Johnny is right. When we get to the Bowser song, it seemed like something that was like Jack Black's agent called him and said, hey, they want you to do something like this. Can you write something tonight? And Jack Black's like, heck yeah. And it comes across like it's a funny song and it's very cute, but it just seemed like something that Jack Black kind of threw together.
Totally.
And it is 100% raw. Like it is full on. This is just Jack Black singing, and it doesn't seem like it's a performance that's Bowser related in any capacity.
It's a first draft of the song.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
There are music videos for it now on YouTube.
Oh God! Like when the cast was announced, he was the one where I'm like, well, I know he's going to give every single thing he can into that role.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes why Jack Black can kind of wear thin on you, is because he puts everything into it, and you're like, I don't need this much. there was never any doubt that he was going to be involved and fully committed, I guess is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, honestly, the only all my complaints about the movie are really just nitpicks, which I think speaks volume to its creation. I don't know, the voice I didn't really care for was surprisingly Cranky Kong. I kind of feel like maybe Fred Armisen wasn't fully aware of who that character was, because it kind of just sounded like him just talking and being angry. I was expecting more of like a Larry David type voice to come out for some reason, but that wasn't something that came out. But it's a fine time. Kamek was great. That's another highlight for me that I wasn't expecting.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I think we'll close that for now. I don't know. Maybe I'll see it at some point. But I'm glad we had the two of you here to talk about it, because I think this worked out really nicely, and now we can say we've covered it on the show. Even though in last week's episode I put in the article, well, if you're tired of hearing your podcasts talk about Mario movie, guess what? None of us have seen it. We're gonna move on to some new business. We've got kind of a interesting collection of stuff. We are going to talk about the Zelda trailer. What we decided we were going to do is we were going to roll through the Mario movie discussion and talk the new business, and then we were going to wrap around to the Zelda trailer afterwards, based on how things go here. So Greg and I both agreed that we're going to hold off on our new business. It's not super timely. I was going to talk about the Fire Emblem DLC, the last range of the DLC, but I could talk about that next week. And Greg, I think you had some stuff too, but we can sit on it for now.
Nothing terribly pressing.
Yeah.
So but rather hear from the people that we have
exactly.
On an irregular basis.
So we're gonna roll into new business instead. And I'm gonna ask Jonny to kick it off. It's got a couple games that are very connected, in particular.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with Atari 50, mainly as a way to transition into something related. But I got Atari 50 as a Christmas present, so I've had it for a few months now, and really haven't. I played through most of it in probably the first 6 weeks or so, and really had a good time with it. It's not like, if you tell me there's a collection of Atari games coming out, not normally something I would really be that compelled to try. I would not consider myself an Atari fan. I never have been, and I have pretty early memories of playing a 2600 and thinking it was crap. And every single time I've ever gone back to mess with 2600 games, I still think they're pretty crappy. And that includes the ones in this collection. And it's probably about 50% 2600 games. So there's a lot of them in there.
Yeah.
But they certainly are a lot more interesting with some historical context, when you can hear from the creators and hear about the bizarre programming techniques involved in making that thing generate anything on the screen. Some of the early days of, learning how to put game credits in as an Easter egg and adventure, and why that was important and what that meant to people who actually managed to figure out how to do it when they were young and, long before the internet. And a lot of times they have both the arcade version, and then the 2600 version of the same game side by side. And those can be pretty funny to be able to see in comparison to each other. Even some of the Atari 7800 type things, there's often a 2600 version of it that was more popular and might even be a better game. But when you compare them side by side, it's astonishing. The level of abstract art that you have to kind of manipulate on the 2600 to represent whatever it is that you're trying to do. Anyway,
I did a couple streams. Now, actually, I don't know that I did the second one yet. I think I did a practice one where I compared how the same game looked on the 2600, even to, it's not quite its contemporaries, but its immediate successors in the Intellivision and the Coleco. And just how everything in the Atari 2600 is remarkably this is vaguely giving you the idea of what this is supposed to look like, because this is all it can do. If you haven't seen it, it is a very, if you think it is orders of magnitudes less capable than, say, the NES
or a Game Boy.
Yeah, it's remarkable that it was as successful as it was.
Yeah, I mean, it is consumer grade late 1970s hardware.
Yeah.
And was not particularly powerful even by the standards of that time, compared to what you could do on a PC. But it was affordable. You could attach it to a television, and that was a big deal. So anyway, I mean, Atari 50 is about much more than that, because you do have some of the later things like the 7800, the Jaguar, a lot of arcade games, which are a lot more interesting, I would say, than their home console stuff. And then a few of the Atari PC games, which I'd never played, I still to this day, I'm not sure I've ever seen an Atari computer in person. Just was not part of my growing up experience at all. And so to see all the photos and the videos of that hardware, and to hear from some of the people involved in creating it, and a lot of the modern day game developers that they interviewed who grew up with these, and these were their first computers, and that's sort of where they learned to program and things. I mean, that stuff is really cool. The context of Atari 50, all the extra information that it gives you is really, that's the main draw for someone like me, because again, I just don't like Atari's games that much, but the historical framework all this is put in, I love, because it is the DNA of the whole game industry. And it goes back to, all the way back to like the early 70s, before I was born. So really fascinating stuff. I mean, I think the later era, as you get into maybe the late 80s and 90s, there's not as much meat to the package there. They don't seem to have as many interviews from that time. Even not as many games. I guess Atari wasn't making as many games back then. But the other thing you have to consider is that this is all Atari first party stuff. So a lot of the best, certainly on the 2600, a lot of the best games were not Atari games. They were Activision games and some of the other third party studios that kind of spun up around that time. And especially later on in the lifetime of that platform. So you're not going to get that stuff here. So it's incomplete in a way, but a really wonderful package. I got it on Switch, which I think is great, to be able to do that stuff portably. A lot of the time I'm just watching documentary videos on my Switch, and I was totally fine with that. And most of them are pretty short. So, it's not a problem to be sitting in the car or, whatever, walking around the house, kind of halfway paying attention to it as you do something else. Not a problem. And then the games all run fine and look fine on it, as fine as they can. But the arcade collection in Atari 50 is the best content for my money. Certainly in terms of the games, they're the best games. And they're uneven, but a lot of them are pretty cool. And some of them are still very fun. And one of them that I'd never heard of, that I encountered for the first time through Atari 50, is a game called Akka. That's AKKA space ARRH, I think. They're nonsense words, they don't mean anything. And the arcade game is pretty abstract, as a lot of them are. So you kind of control this turret that's fixed in the center of the screen. And around it was a trackball game in the arcade. And on Atari 50, you just use a joystick to move the cursor, all over the screen, wherever you want. And basically the enemies approach from the edges of the screen. So they come in toward the center, and you're trying to shoot them down. And they pass over this field, this play area that's irregularly shaped. A lot of the levels kind of have they look sort of like a flower, or flower petals. And different pieces of the flower petals will activate. So when you shoot your shot, it's kind of like a bomb. And if it lands anywhere in that particular sector of the field, then any enemy that is on top of that field at that time will die. So it has a bomb-like feel to it. But, you're basically just choosing which of these sectors that you're going to be targeting at any given time. And the enemies, sometimes they move faster than your cursor. So they're transiting across different sectors. You're trying to lead your shot so that the bomb goes off at the moment when it's over that particular place. It's kind of a neat idea. The the description of the game is it's meant to be sort of a reverse missile command. I don't really agree with that. It doesn't really feel like Missile Command, but it is a unique concept. And it's a little weird. The other very strange thing about it is that if the enemies do manage to get all the way to the center of the screen where your turret is, then they will invade you. And then you have to go downstairs. So you push a separate button and the screen field changes. And now you've zoomed in, and you still have the turret at the center, but now it's shooting bullets instead of bombs. And so you've got these enemies that are now very close to you, and they're running around and trying to steal your. No, they're just sort of attacking you. You have kind of a shield that they eat away at, and eventually they'll get through it and they'll kill you.
What was the time that this game was developed, roughly?
Like 1981 or 82.
This is a fairly complex arcade game for 81, 82.
Yeah, it's a neat premise that it doesn't quite map to anything else I've ever seen, and apparently it did kind of confound the playtest audiences where they set it up, these prototype units, and so Atari ended up deciding to not release it. The feedback they got from people wasn't that great, and they didn't think it would make that much money. So the name is terrible, Akka Arrh. So they canceled it. And I guess a couple of prototypes floated around, and they eventually dumped the ROM, and it's been in MAME for years. And I'm really glad they included it here because it's such a fascinating little relic. But it's also a great point of reference because I've also been playing the new game from Llamasoft, from the designer Jeff Minter, which is Akka Arrh. Apparently, and I saw an interview with him about this. Apparently, Atari, the new owner of Atari, who just took over a couple years ago, is a pretty young person, and he came to Jeff Minter, who has certainly a sordid history with Atari over the past couple of decades, good and bad. They've been on the outs for a while, but I guess they're back together now. And he offered Minter, the head of Llamasoft, which is like a 2-person studio, offered him to do a remake of any Atari game that he wanted. And I don't know how he chose Akka Arrh, an Atari game that almost no one's ever heard of because it didn't even come out. But that's the one that he chose, maybe just because the premise is so unusual. So,
did he work on it?
No. I think Minter didn't get into the game industry until the late 80s or early 90s. Yeah, he wouldn't have been old enough at the time. So no, he had no connection to the original at all. Nor did he with Tempest, right? But he sort of made his name making Tempest 2000 for the Jaguar, which is a similar kind of remake where let's take the original premise and basically just provide that, but with some new levels. But also let's add a bunch of psychedelic visuals and weirdo music, techno music and stuff, and just make it sort of more confusing and bizarre. And he's still doing that, I actually also played some Space Giraffe recently on the Xbox, which is a very good example of a Jeff Minter game that is pretty fun. But anyway, Akka Arrh, the new version of it is about $20. You can get it on Switch, you can get it on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and it's really good. It's really fun. I think it was smart for Minter to choose something like this where he could change the gameplay pretty significantly without upsetting anyone, because the game doesn't really have fans, because nobody knows about it. So he was able to go in and sort of fundamentally upturn certain things about it to make it a better game. And the main thing that he did, the sort of basic premise is on the surface, it seems quite similar. You still have this turret that's fixed at the middle, and the levels change shape, and enemies will invade you, and then you have to zoom in and go downstairs, as they call it, to basically just a different screen, where now your turret behaves a little bit differently, the enemies behave a little bit differently, and that's kind of like your last resort when you get invaded. So all that is still true in the new one. And of course, it has lots of really crazy visual effects, really strange sound effects, voice samples saying things that you're not even quite sure what they're saying, and really silly text popping up all over the place and in between the levels. These are all pretty standard for Jeff Minter games, so you could look at any of them and get a pretty good idea of what's going on here. But I think the really fun twist that he added here is that in the main play screen, when you have the enemies coming from the edges and they're sort of coming at you, they're trying to steal your pods, which are like your health points that live at the center. And as the enemies come in, you shoot these bombs at them. And if a bomb hits an enemy, the enemy will cause an explosion that expands in some pattern. The pattern's change level to level. But the explosion expands, and if that explosion catches another enemy, then that enemy will also explode. And so it's all set up to create chain reactions. And you're very encouraged right from the very beginning. The game doesn't explain a whole lot of the mechanics, but it does definitely get this across, that your goal is to use as few bombs as possible to create chain reactions that could last even the entire level if you're really good, if the timing is just right. There's a couple of things like you can get power-ups and do a couple other things to chain it and sort of keep it going a little bit longer. And it's very satisfying. It reminded me, did Bangai-O do something like this back on the DS, where an exploding enemy could cause another enemy to also explode?
It was kind of like, but like, the closer you were to danger, the bigger kind of like retaliatory, massive like chaining kind of missile attack you could fire off. So it was always about sort of brinkmanship, like just let everything encircle you as much as possible, and then you could just let off this enormous destructive volley of stuff that just could keep going and going and going and kill almost everything. So I mean, it's different, but I could kind of see a bit of a parallel there.
Yeah, I have thought of Bangai-O a few times, but yeah, that mechanic sounds like it's a little different than I remember. But I think the chain reaction bomb thing is pretty fun. It might be a little bit too simple to make the whole game around, but there's something else going on, which is that every time one of these bomb explosions kills an enemy, you get a bullet for your gun. And so there are two different ammo types. There's the bombs and the bullets. And the bullets just fire straight out. They're a lot faster, but they have limited ammo that has to be recharged by killing things with bombs. And there's certain enemies that can only be killed by the bullets. You also are encouraged to conserve your bullets because you get a lot of bonuses at the end of the level if you have bullets left over. You can regain health, you can carry bullets over to the next level, you get bonus points, etc. So the gameplay ends up being this kind of balance between the two different ammo types and figuring out which enemies are best dealt with by which ones. There's a lot of timing. There's some reflexes here. I mean, it is a twitchy arcade game, but I do get the sense, I'm like 14 levels into it, which is not that far, but like, I've seen some stuff. And I get the sense that your success in the game comes I think it depends a lot more on your strategy and your kind of ability to discern what's going on through all the chaos, all the flashing colors and stuff. I think just being able to understand which enemies are which and which things do I need to focus on at this moment and then be able to switch to something else. I think that's really where the skill comes in, rather than having like the fastest thumbs and, things like the fastest reflexes. So I really had a lot of fun with it. I think as remakes go, it's very thoughtful. It's very smart. And you certainly do not need to have played the original to appreciate it. I would say if you've never played a Jeff Minter game, you can find a lot of other ones for less than $20, and you might want to check out one of those before you check out Akka Arrh, because it's a hard game and it's not very user-friendly, and there's not a lot of help online. I actually did a little searching today for some tips and strategy, found very little. There's not even a thread about this game on GameFAQs. Wow. So I don't think many people are playing it. And if you're really bad at the game, or you just don't have the patience to kind of figure it out, I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of value out of it. So it may not be worth your money in that case, but I'm a Jeff Minter fan. I especially like the game he did for PlayStation VR. Polybius is insanity. I mean, to see this guy's visual style in VR is especially fun and sort of mind-bending. So that's my favorite of his, but I've liked a few of his for sure. So this is very much in line with those, but it plays differently than most of his typical sort of like Tempest clones. So yeah, pretty cool game.
Xander, I'm going to ask you to wrap up our new business segment. So, do you have? I'm gonna actually lean in a different direction than the order we talked about originally. So just try to roll with me.
All right.
We got an email last week about meta challenges, where basically it was like, I'm going to go play an entire series, and for whatever reason, it didn't occur to me that you had just done that.
Yeah.
But you're here now, and apparently you've done or been engaged in this behavior more than I realized. What have you been up to?
Well, I think I should start off by saying, I often feel like I'm playing catch up with a lot of Nintendo. I grew up on Mario, and that was just about it. Mario and Pokemon, a little bit of Animal Crossing, but I didn't play Zelda games. I didn't play Metroid. I didn't play Star Fox. I didn't even know what Earthbound was. With the exception of being, introduced to all those franchises through Smash Brothers, as many people are, I didn't have that familiarity with them. And so when I got older and I decided I wanted to, see what else was out there, I thought, well, I should probably expand my horizons a little bit and see what else I can play. To give a point of reference, I played demos of Ocarina of Time through the Smash Brothers Masterpiece mode, but I think my first game,
man.
I'm pretty sure the only game I played as a kid and beat was Spirit Tracks, I think, which I think for you guys probably is crazy because you're there for Ocarina of Time, you're there for the Wind Waker launch, that's tying into your retroactive. Whereas I had the demo disc for Wind Waker, and that was about it, and I didn't ever play it. So, yeah, as I've gotten older, I've been trying to play catch up, and with Metroid Dread having been announced way back in 2021 and also released shortly after, I thought, well, now's an opportunity for me to kind of get through these Metroid games. The conversation around the series online is that they don't come out very often, and so maybe it means it'll be an easier series to get through. And
they don't on average come out very often, but they do have a tendency to be very spurty. Yes.
So I thought, okay, well, I'll just start playing through them and kind of lead up. NWR has a book club, if listeners aren't aware. They've been doing it for Metroid, and I think they're wrapping up 3D Zelda right now. You can listen to that over on Connectivity. But I'm trying to get through all the Metroid games, and so I started with the NES one, and I knew going in, because I've heard you guys talk about it on this show, that the NES game and the Game Boy game are a bit harder to go back to be generous. So I thought, well, I'm probably not going to beat them, but I know that there are remakes, so I'll probably play those. I just want to try them out, say that I've at least given them a shot. And for both Metroid 1 and 2, I enjoyed them. I actually kind of wanted to keep going. I just, there's small little things like not being able to heal quickly or having to or not having a map, things like that, which a lot of people like that about Metroid. That just wasn't for me. So yeah. I gave them a fair shake, and I played them each for a few hours and then moved on to the remakes. But once I got to Samus Returns, things changed. I played through that game and on my 3DS, and I'm not really sure why, but I hated it, especially towards the end. I was ready to be done, and maybe I was feeling burnt out because Greg had mentioned that Zero Mission was a short game, and I believe him because he plays it annually, right?
It's something I've enjoyed. It's been a little while now since I've gone back to it, actually, but yeah, certainly again, one of the games I've replayed the most because it is, it's brief, and especially if you put it on, if you leave it on normal, it's very easy, really, really easy. So almost to a fault at times, some of the boss design gets undermined by how easy it is, because you could just kind of sit there and take damage and pump something full of missiles, and it doesn't really matter. You're going to win, even if you're not actively dodging that much. So when I've talked about, as I have in the past few weeks, about the sort of pros and cons of hard modes in Metroid, it's that's an additional pro, really probably only for Zero Mission, is that, actually, wow, this boss has design I didn't know. Right. But, at the same time, there is something nice about how quickly you can go through it on normal. So
it took me 9 hours.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it depends where you're coming to it from, because it's like I would say probably the biggest one that would like expedite things to some extent for playing Zero Mission is probably Super Metroid, because even though it is technically a remake of the first Metroid game, it's almost like a kind of paralogue Super Metroid, because Super Metroid was like what today Screen 5 tells me is a requel, where it's like it's a remake and a sequel at the same time. I'm afraid when you're cut off from social media, you have to learn about these things through Screen 5. That's the sad place that I find myself in life these days. But the point is that like a lot of what Zero Mission does is kind of what Super Metroid did as well, but like, so if you've played Super Metroid, I think you just take to Zero Mission very naturally.
And I didn't play before. Things. I didn't have that like Metroid like jargon that I have with like say Mario. I know the secrets they put in Mario games. I can sniff them out from a mile away. But like with Metroid, like some of them are very similar, and other times like I was like I have no idea what's that block doing there. I don't know what that symbol means.
This is something that I don't know that people necessarily quite get. Like, even if you're a generalist in video games, which, a lot of people are, is that when you get in with the series, and like this, for me, this was latent, you can really get into the design language of how the people who make that game think.
Yeah.
And then it's very easy for you to unwind their thinking and just dive on it. So even, with Metroid, it's the same company, but it was very, well, generally speaking, it was very much a different group than the Mario team, and so like, because how Nintendo's was stratified at that point, I can very much see why the design language of how secrets and stuff are hidden becoming very ingrained from Mario, but not making their way into Metroid. But a Zelda, it might, especially early Zeldas, that might feel much more familiar for that same reason, because some of the same minds.
Right, and as I played through them, I certainly developed that eye, because my play times did get shorter, kind of. The games also got, I noticed, a little longer, especially with Metroid Dread. But I could tell I was getting better at them for sure. And so, when you're playing through something for the first time, a lot of people will say the go-to is just play them in the order that they were released. And, I can't fault that mindset. When it came to Metroid, I kind of approached it with a bit of a weird way of playing through the games. I played them, I guess, chronologically in terms of the narrative. So I did the NES one, and then I played Zero Mission, and then I played the Game Boy game for a little bit, and then I played Samus Returns. And then after I beat Samus Returns, which is kind of where I stopped talking, I think, honestly, it was just the game with it being so action heavy. I don't know what's up with my hands, but it really hurt my hands after a while to play it on the 3DS, to the point where I didn't think I was going to finish it. I would love to play that game again with a proper controller, not like the 3DS itself, which is crazy because I didn't get a Wii U until 2015, and for the time period between having a Wii and getting a Wii U, I pretty much only played on my 3DS. I was very surprised that I was having as much difficulty as I was, but maybe it was just because it was...
I don't know you mean that. I mean, as much as I played my 3DSs, and I had quite a few different models. The one that when I got my Japanese 2DS, just to have access to that shop, and to get it for cheap and load some money onto my Japanese Switch account and all that. It was just very little on eBay. It wasn't something I prized or anything. But I felt like, this is a lot more comfortable for games where you use the D-pad, because the D-pad is in the middle of that system because it isn't clamshell. Whereas the D-pad on a regular clamshell 3DS or 2DS XL or whatever is on the bottom, especially if an XL is big bloody thing, and then you're kind of holding the whole thing up from the bottom trying to manipulate the D-pad. Not so bad if it's a circle pad kind of game, but if it's a D-pad kind of game, Yeah,
it's a lever arm, essentially.
It kind of wears on it a little bit, I find. So, yeah, that's where I feel like, I could imagine, even if it's not something you've noticed playing quite a lot of games, like if you made games you could have used a circle pad for that were less kind of actiony, because Samus Returns is very actiony. It's one of the most. I mean, Dread obviously is quite similar, as you might imagine, being the same sort of collaboration with Nintendo internal and Mercury Steam and stuff, but it's kind of both of those games really do pick up where Fusion kind of left off, of like, okay, let's kind of I kind of feel like, and I don't disagree if they did think this way, like it's very difficult to top Super Metroid and Zero Mission as exploratory games. From my point of view, I think they did that really, really well. So I think, it kind of made sense to take it in a more, to try and sort of go more action and try and sort of top those games in that way, because like there was the kind of meat left on the bone there. But that could be, the issue there.
Well, I played it, and I'm glad I beat it. Like I said, I'd play it again if they ever put it on a console where I can use an actual controller. But after I beat it, I was like, you know what? I'll check out AM2R, because that's the thing people recommend. And when I got to like the first, maybe it was like the second or third Metroid fight, I was like, I am done with Metroid 2. I cannot do this anymore. So I just kind of quit playing at that point. I guess I was maybe burnt out. But then fast forward, this was all like early 2022 or 20. When did Metroid Dread come out? Was that 2021?
Yeah,
September,
this is way back
October. 21.
This would have been like the summer. It was right after they announced Metroid Dread. That's when all this was happening. And then I just quit playing. And then this past February, you may have saw that they shadow dropped the Metroid Prime remaster. And that was like, okay, I definitely want to play that. I'm just going to, the shadow drop, it worked on me. I felt like a really gullible fish that they threw that, and I bought it instantly. And because I'd only played a little bit of the trilogy, and a lot of people say that they prefer the pointer controls with that, and I could not get into them for the life of me. Having that dual stick with the gyro was a godsend for me personally. So I picked it up when I saw that specifically was included, and I played through it nonstop. It was a game where I could not put it down, and I was upset when I had to do responsible tasks like going to work, because I would rather be at home playing this amazing video game, which is a great sign, but also a bit silly.
Would you consider it a game of the decade?
I probably, yeah. I'm actually kind of sad that I didn't have that one on the GameCube when I was a kid, because I think I would have really enjoyed it. Yeah. It was pretty good. But anyway, I played through Metroid Prime. I kind of interrupted my chronological order of going through them, and I thought, well, I want to play the other Prime games now, and I know that I have them on the trilogy. Do I hold out hope that they do an HD port to the Switch, or do I just, suck it up and play through the control scheme that I don't want to do? And then I thought, well, I didn't ever get to Super Metroid and Fusion, so maybe I'll just, go back onto my 2D adventure. So I went back to Nintendo Switch Online, played through Super, loved it. That wall jump is horrible, but other than that, it's amazing.
Yes.
I had to get Justin Berube on the phone, and he had to log in and join my session and show me how to do the wall jump after I tried. For 3 hours, I was trying to do this horrible wall jump.
Isn't that the job of those little animals or whatever? Yeah. The Etikins, or I forget what they're called.
Yeah,
the Berubians.
Yes,
they were mocking me. That's how
he did a better job, so he should get it. That should be his job from now on. Which also means he saves the galaxy in Metroid Fusion. Spoilers, but it's true.
That's the point. Is I was so enraptured at how cute they were when I first saw them, and then by the third hour, it's these little devils are tormenting me with that's easy. Come on, you can do it. And then they show up again in Fusion, and they save the day. Funny.
There's a very similar jump in Galaxy 2 that's a real absolute pain in the ass. And the super guide Luigi just shows you how to do it. It's oh no, it's very easy. You just do these 11 straight wall jumps, and it's no, actually that sucks. Stop. I don't want to do it. The it's just a nightmare. There is something very awful about when the game shows it to you flawlessly. Like, look, see, it's simple. And then you go and do it, and your human hands cannot replicate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder about that, because it's like whether they wanted it to be tricky to perform, you know, like, because like the design of there's loads of way the game gets the structure can be broken by how freeform that wall jump is. Like when they did it for Fusion and Zero Mission, it's a lot easier to do, but it's also a lot less useful. You can't abuse it as much to like break the progression of the game. So I don't know whether that was like how much of that was purposeful and how much of that was accidental. And then, you know, obviously it was quite a few years. It was 8 years or so, but they came back to Fusion. They looked back on it and went, let's kind of make it more of like, because I mean, in general, it's not particularly something you need to do very much. You know, there's that one bit where it's kind of, if you end up in that pit, you know, the creatures quote unquote teach it to you, like you need to do it. But a lot of the game, it's not something you need to do very much.
Yeah, Matt Zawodniak told me that it's the only place where it's actually required to actually get through the game. And Justin told me that he thinks it's the earliest wall jump in any Nintendo game, and that might be the reason why it's so finicky. I would have never known that like it was like actually possible, because like I said, I spent forever trying to get out of there, and I'm like, it clearly looks like a wall jump. That's what these little animals are doing. Why can I not do this?
We're going to teach you this skill and never make you pass this test again. Great. Right. That feels awesome.
Yeah.
So it's like it's there for, it's really kind of like it's there for if you want to mess around with potentially getting stuff before you're kind of supposed to, and all this kind of, you know, it's kind of additional. I mean, even more like arcane than that is like the crystal flash thing that they show in the attract mode, which is like this just weird way of being able to like recover health.
Yeah, I didn't even know about that until it was like recommended to me in my so for another point of reference is after I played through Prime Remastered, in just 2 weeks I played through Super Metroid, Fusion, Other M, and also Dread. Oh my god, I powered through these games because I was just so like obsessed with what was going to happen next, and I was really enjoying the gameplay. But yeah, then like I started getting all these YouTube recommendations on like what the crystal flash, as Greg mentioned.
The algorithm.
I am a little fanboy over here. I was going through and I'm like, oh, I wonder what they've talked about on RFN that I didn't understand. Now I can like retroactively go back and like hear conversation. So I would like, you know, I'd go into the search bar and look up like Metroid Fusion because Jonny, you reviewed that, and I got to hear the responses.
Yes, I reviewed it more than 20 years ago.
Oh, God.
Back when I was 6 years old.
Oh, God. I don't like this.
Sorry, I just, you know, it's a low-hanging fruit to throw out the age joke.
I love that a whippersnapper like you, though, can go through all these old Metroid games and have a good time. It's very, fills my heart to hear that.
How many total did you end up touching? I lost count at some point as you were going through.
Let's see. NES, Game Boy, Zero Mission, the 3DS game, Super, Fusion, Other M, which I played after Fusion, and then Dread. So that's 8. And then Prime Remaster is 9. And so 9 total, but if you count the fan game, that's 10.
Okay. Oof. So I'll be interested to see what you think of Prime 2 and 3. I know their availability is circumspect at the moment.
Right. And like I said, I have them. It's just like my idea was after I played Prime Remastered, like, okay, there's plenty of Metroid games I haven't gotten to yet. You know, like surely the number of games left will hold me out until the inevitable like summer direct when maybe they announce a port. And I beat them in 2 weeks, and it's great.
I don't agree that the Prime 2 remaster is inevitable.
No, not at all. No, I don't think that's inevitable.
I keep seeing people say that. I'm like, but why? I just like a lot of work.
Galaxy 2.
Yeah, you're right.
Galaxy 2.
And a lot more work went into Prime Remaster that went into the Galaxy port. Let's put it that way.
No, exactly.
My thing is, if in the summertime they announce like some sort of look at Metroid Prime 4, that's when I'll say, okay, I'm just gonna have to play through Prime 2 and 3 on the Wii trilogy.
Because if they show 4, 2, and 3 are definitely not coming between that and now.
I shouldn't use the word inevitably. That's I'm leading myself.
Well, I mean, you're not the only one though. Like, there's this weird like undercurrent of like, well, they're definitely gonna do 2 now. 1 did well, and it's like it took them a really long time to do 1, man.
Yeah, people make assumptions, like you said, Galaxy 2. A lot of people thought that Zelda was going to get a 35th anniversary direct. It's like, you're right. I'm embarrassed, actually, I said that now.
Where the fuck is Wind Waker HD on Switch?
Yeah.
Nintendo is... We have an email that now I'm going to bring into this topic, so we'll deal with that later.
But to wrap up, I've been like retroactively trying to get through all of these video game series that I just haven't had a chance to, or really didn't get exposed to growing up, outside of just seeing them in Smash Brothers. I've fallen in love with the Pikmin series, but I didn't play it until college, and there's only really 3 of them, now 4. But like I like fist pumped when I saw Pikmin 4 was like being announced, because it's like, wow, I'm caught up. I can't wait to play that. I play the mobile game with Guillaume still, and it's great.
I was about to make a joke. There are 5 Pikmin games, sir.
Hey, Pikmin. Yeah, we know. But
Pikmin Bloom.
Now I'm going through the new Super Mario Brothers games, and it's just like I'm trying to get through all these like video game series. It's like I haven't really like looked at with a critical eye. I just kind of like played through them. I'm actually considering replaying Galaxy 2 because I remember playing it as a kid years after it came out and thinking this is like super lame and like not having any fun with it, and I was a dumb kid. Like I think I was craving the epicness that the first one has that the second one doesn't really go for. It's way more fun with all the level design, and so I think I remember like getting to the end and beating Bowser and being like, that's it, and then never turning it on. Like the whole green star thing, I never even knew about that till listening to Arrh.
Wow. So there's some wild stuff that comes out of the green star space.
Yeah, but when I'm such a big Mario fan, it's like, well, I have to go back and play that, right? Because there's so much I haven't experienced that I probably would love. So
it's funny. I should go back and replay that too, because I played it that one 3-day window I had and just burned myself on that game forever.
The other thing is like in the lead up to Breath of the Wild, I played through all the Zelda games I hadn't played through. It's like I'm trying to like tick boxes in series and see if I can get through them. It's like for a lot of the major ones, I'm caught up, but some others, it's like, I don't know.
What's your next project? Just as a tease.
Oh, take a break.
That's a worthy project.
That's the right answer.
Not something. I don't think we touched on this when we dealt with that email about the sort of macro goals last week, but. Diminishing returns would be a concern of mine if you were to do it on this sort of scale. I have to say,
and Metroid's a relatively benign series to do it on because there's not a ton of games. There's 10.
And some of them are short. Pretty quick, compared to Zelda.
Yeah, you're not joking. Like it was kind of nice to like wow, I beat Metroid Fusion. That took me like 2-3 days. Like I'm done. Cool.
Like we joked about like if you wanted to do the three main story Xenoblade games and the 2 side story spin-offs.
Yes.
And not even touch X. Just leave X completely out of it. Like you're probably signing up for more time than the Metroid run you just went through.
Well, that's another thing where it's like they're not all obviously the same series, but there's like a list of RPGs that I have that I like everyone claims is like like God's gift to the earth, and it's like I want to get through them. It's just like they're all so long, like Xenoblade, Chrono Trigger. I've never really beaten a
Chrono Trigger is pretty short.
Final Fantasy. It's just like Dragon Quest. It's like all of these games.
Dragon Quest games can be very long.
I want to get through them, and I it's there's only so much time in the day, and I got
Out of those, I think Chrono Trigger sounds the most accessible in terms of it's kind of was built for replayability, so it's not overly long to do in one, and it straddles Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, so you kind of it could be a good entry point into those.
And then you can take your current trend and buy the Radical Dreamers collection and watch a visual novel that's all text and then play Chrono Cross.
Yep.
Commit 800 hours to Chrono Cross.
Sometimes I do like really weird things. I really don't know what the rhyme or reason is for my decision making, but like, okay, I'm done playing Metroid, even though I didn't finish my Metroid like interest, I'll just play, I don't know, how about Captain Rainbow? Like, I've never played that before. And it's like, no one's talking about that game. It doesn't ever come out of Japan.
That's another Skip game. We were talking about Skip last week with Chibi Robo and all that. That's something that they did after Chibi Robo.
Yeah. Well, Chibi Robo is another one where it's like I haven't played any Chibi Robo games, but also like those are kind of hard to come by.
Yeah, it'd be really nice if the original could be more available. They re-released it in Japan for Wii, but they didn't bother everywhere else.
And then there were 2 DS games, I think.
Yeah, there were 2 DS games.
And we didn't get
one
both
of them was Japan only. Yeah, the one that was more traditional. There was like the gardening one was came everywhere, and then
I thought
there
that was for
like
DS and not 3DS.
Yeah. Those were DS games. Yeah,
there was a 3DS game as well, but that was
kind of multiple ones because there was the Ziplash, the platform, but then there was like the photo one on 3DS.
Oh, that's right.
Photo Finder. Yeah.
God, what a absolute like nightmare of a series to go through and go.
There's a surprising amount of Chibi Robo product, considering obviously it was never exactly the biggest thing in the world. But I think the Japanese only DS game that didn't get translated, I think, was something like Lucky Rich Sweep or something like the title. Like, but that I think seemed like it was the closest any of the subsequent games ever got to the GameCube game. Obviously, it was still a DS game, so it wasn't, technically on par, but...
I feel like there was a Chibi Robo game Europe didn't get, because I feel like it was in one of the packages of the Great Exporting that I did, because it was like a Walmart exclusive game.
Yeah, the Walmart one, I don't think that came here, yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely in one of the export packages of like weird shit games Europe didn't get.
Yeah,
I
think you're whereas like we did get Tingle, but America didn't. Like that was
right. So I got 4 copies of Tingle in the return package for
the
that
weird
one. It was
stuff
great.
that was going on, and of course Band Brothers. We can never forget.
I got
Band
8
Brothers.
copies of Band Brothers in that shipment.
Gosh.
When people say, Nintendo published games never drop in price, well, that always has to have a little asterisk and a footnote with Band Brothers on them.
I imported Band Brothers for $4. It costs more to ship it across the ocean. Oh.
I will say that while I am still catching up with many of the Nintendo series, I caught all the references in the Mario movie that I could possibly see, and that this year in particular kind of feels like a culmination where it's like, okay, cool, like I know all the Zelda games, I'm ready for Tears of the Kingdom. I know all the Pikmin games, I'm ready for Pikmin 4. I know all the Layton games that are good, so I'm ready for Professor Layton in the new world of Steam, Bison, whatever. But
Steam Bison America.
and you've played almost all the Metroid games. You're ready for Metroid Prime 4.
Yeah,
there you
absolutely.
Go. Homework is complete.
I think that in the future, you're going to find obviously more people like me that they're introduced to Nintendo later on. So they just haven't, also Nintendo doesn't make all these series available, as we've mentioned. So it's like people that want to catch up. I think my story will become more common as the years go by, which I kind of hope isn't like as difficult. It's not as difficult to play these games, but only time will tell.
I think we've got an inch, like that email that I was talking about. I think comes back onto this, so we'll pick that up there. I think but like their Metroid Prime remake, or excuse me, Metroid 2 remake that made Metroid 2 more available is now not available. So
exactly.
I also it's a very different game. I mean,
sure.
The premise is the same, but and that does like kind of inform the design and all that. But it's very, very different. So it's not it's nice that the Metroid 2 is on Switch Online now, with the Game Boy games coming to Switch Online. Like, it's nice that it is, but that in very, very little sense does that substitute for the lack of Samus Returns, if you wanted that.
Well, and so when I said, like, it makes it more available, I actually meant more from, like, a gameplay standpoint. Because Metroid 2 is already on 3DS. But, like, it's just much more playable than Metroid 2.
That of course, but I feel like it's the Switch Online might be nice for like Metroid 2 kind of people actually trying it, because it's got such a kind of it's got a dark cloud over it in terms of, all the things are like, well, the graphics are, really limited for actually making the scenery distinctive. You can barely see a few feet in front of your face because they went with the big, playable character sprite. So it's, quite difficult in some senses. It's still doesn't have a map yet. That was, a Super Metroid thing. Like, that's a lot of things that put people off when they have to pay for it a la carte, like they did on Virtual Console. Whereas now maybe more people will actually give it a go. Now you can do it without pay specifically, and you've got your rewind functionality and some other things to make it a bit easier and whatnot.
It's surprising though that I only did all this because they announced Metroid Dread, and I was like, well, there's a new game coming out. I know Prime 4 is being made. Like, now's the time, But I don't know, 5-10 years from now, maybe they haven't done anything with Samus Returns. Maybe it's still lost to the 3DS, so to speak. So it's does the next baby Xander come along and I want to play the Metroid games, and then he just can't because they're not available. I don't know, Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn came out in 2019, and now it's gone. That was not that long ago, but it's you can't buy it anymore. Just kind of crazy.
Well, you can't buy Kirby's regular Epic Yarn either.
Right, his normal yarn.
Kirby's standard yarn.
I mean, you can buy these games. You just have to buy them secondhand. So.
And the prices are exorbitant.
Yes, there's supply and demand involved there. That's not with a digital storefront.
Yeah, that latest Layton game, the Azran Legacy on the 3DS, I just was kind of curious, but the physical cartridge is a lot of money now. It's over $100.
I guess they just didn't make that many.
Anyway, that's kind of that's my stance on the whole thing. That's my story.
We're going to take a break here. When we come back, we're going to touch a little bit on the Zelda trailer. We want to talk about it. And I've got one email that I want us to touch on because it's come up a lot on this stuff. So we might do that email first and then do the Zelda trailer. So stay tuned for that. We are back. We're going to do one email, and then we're going to close out the show with the Tears of the Kingdom final trailer. Emails. You know where to send them. We talked about it. The replicants aren't here this week, so I'll just go ahead and say it. It's rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. As Jonny revealed earlier in the episode, he set that email address up.
Well, I probably did, but it's been a long time ago, and I probably shouldn't claim credit for that because I don't know for sure.
It was a fairly finite number of people who could set up email addresses. So
it very well could have been me.
Yeah. But, again, that is rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. And I'm going to read the email we're going to do this week because I was kind of going to not do email, but this is so related to what we're talking about. I figure it's worth going in. David writes, "Hey, RFN crew." Kinda. "Many are speculating about what the Switch's successor release timing and power level will be. Blah, blah, blah. Screw all that. Here's the important question. Do you think the Switch's successor will be backwards compatible? If not, will you personally be disappointed? And what do you think Nintendo's excuse will be? Thanks, and keep up the good non-AI work."
Insert the siren. We do not know what the Switch successor is.
Yeah, we're going to need to make that now. I might make it for this episode. The old NX siren is still in our editing resources folder. This question works under the assumption that the form factor and nature of the Switch's successor is compatible with the idea of backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
Which, given the success they had, you would think Nintendo would be incentivized to do that. But
consider when they've done it with, they did it with Wii, even though the form factor of the Wii controller was nothing like the GameCube controller.
Yeah.
Even the Wii discs weren't the same size as the GameCube discs, and so
they had to have a stupid loading mechanism because of it.
Yeah.
Again, the one thing that went in that, because that's what I was going to say, you've got a few different kind of categories here. It's is the system that they were iterating on and following up successful in the first place? And I guess the big one where it was successful, but there was no back compat, was the first one. From NES to Super NES. That was, kind of an interesting choice. They didn't have it. But since then, they've had, certainly with systems that have been of something that had a lot of high install base, lots of software out there that people had bought and might want to keep playing. They generally have had it. You think of the Wii to Wii U, you think of DS to 3DS, or even GBA to DS is an interesting one because all that third pillar rhetoric, like, oh, this is almost like a separate line of hardware, but it's compatible with this other one that already exists. It kind of undercut that a little bit. But again, a lot of the other part of it, other than just the popularity of the systems involved, is the hardware element, and I think that's why we got GameCube compatibility, is just because the Wii was so very similar to GameCube. It really would have been like just taking it out on purpose, if it wasn't.
And fundamentally, the reason why the Wii U doesn't do GameCube is because they would have had to support all the GameCube crap. Like the weird discs, because again, it's a slot loader, and the GameCube has that little mini disc that's notoriously not great for slot loaders. And all the ports that are necessary for the GameCube. So they just didn't. I mean, hardware-wise, it coulda. And there are like firmware things that you can do on the Wii mode in the Wii U that prove that, it's perfectly capable of behaving like a GameCube. They just chose not to.
So if the next console... Go ahead, Greg. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say the big difference, though, of course, from Wii U to kind of Wii U and 3DS to Switch, that isn't about how popular those systems were. All that is because Nintendo made quite a decisive break from a hardware point of view. The Nvidia setup they got for Switch, completely different sort of family of hardware than they'd ever used before. So not only did they have this situation where the Wii U was a bomb, and they would have been much happier, and this is how it turned out, to just kind of port the games to Switch and sell them anew. But also, it's like, no, we're doing new hardware. It's kind of doing some of the, attacking some of the same things that we wanted Wii U to attack, in terms of it's something that can be popular both, in Japan and elsewhere. It's something that doesn't have to monopolize the TV, but it's something that can be played on TV and, has good enough graphics to hold up on today's big TVs and all that kind of stuff, but doing it in a different way with different hardware. So it wasn't all about how much of a commercial failure Wii U was, why they kind of didn't have back compat. Now, of course, that completely switches around for Switch itself, both in terms of the fact that it is enormously successful, and second of all, would we expect them to kind of do another complete reset on the hardware side? That's way beyond my ability to comment.
Well, and not even necessarily like the guts of the hardware. Like the other part is there's a massive form factor change on the Wii U to the Switch. Like because of its portability, putting a disc drive in it was a non-starter. So that's a big component. So the disc was out right away. And there's a number of reasons to knock a disc drive out, not least of which is that it's a thing that can break. The Switch is a fairly solid state machine with the exception of its fan. So broadly speaking, it's fairly serviceable. But because we don't know what the factor of the Switch's successor is, obviously if they are going to do something radically different in that space, like it's, even if the guts are the same, it's fundamentally not hardware. The hardware is not aligned in a way for back compatibility to make sense, I guess is the way I'm wording it. Then obviously they're not going to just force it in there just for the purpose of forcing it in there. But I mean, the point we've been hitting on though is that they've been reasonably good about this unless there was a reason where like it just didn't work, or like the only case where you could argue that they went beyond that is like I said with the GameCube stuff all the way to Wii U. Like it's in a diminishing returns point as well. Like how much value does the Wii U gain if it can play GameCube games? Does that make up for the price cost of putting in a bunch of ports and finding places to put shit? Probably not. If you look inside a Wii U, it's a pretty full device. Having to jam 4 ports and 2 memory card slots and whatever other accoutrement just isn't necessary.
I added that graphic that they put out maybe a year or so ago.
The future outlook graphic.
The one with the console that's coming in 20XX. One of the things that they focus on is, they really push the benefits of being a Switch Online subscriber as something that could likely carry over into whatever their next project could be. So, the immediate assumption is, playing online, your cloud saves, perhaps this library of retro titles, depending on what they decide to do with that. That seems like it would be obvious. But one thing that kind of relates specifically to this in terms of backwards compatibility are like the DLC packs that come with the N64 expansion pack. It's like if the Switch 2 comes out and like all of this online subscription model is then brought to that as well. Like, does that mean Splatoon 2's DLC is going to be available on the Switch 2? Does that mean Animal Crossing New Horizons and Mario Kart 8's booster? Like, all of that stuff's in there.
I don't think those tie Nintendo's hands with backwards compatibility, because the DLC that's included with the expansion pack has kind of always been, to me, it's always been suggested as something that's being included on a temporary basis. Like if you get this for now, you'll get all the Mario Kart DLC. That's not necessarily going to be true in the future, whereas the N64 and Genesis and Game Boy Advance platforms on Nintendo Switch Online I've always seen those as more like the core benefits of subscribing.
Well, because you can
online
purchase
gameplay too.
Those DLC packs can be purchased elsewhere,
Exactly.
just as standalone things. Whereas, of course, access to those retro libraries cannot. So
I guess when I think about, I never have thought about like those benefits specifically ever expiring. I guess that thought has never crossed my mind.
I think they worded it in such a way that they could, but they've never done it. Like there was the implication that like, for this, like it'll be there for the year, and then it felt like they were implying they would replace it with a different DLC bundle, but they haven't actually pulled that string. So it's been additive up to this point.
But it's still only the expansion pack is not even 2 years old yet.
Right.
So,
we're just coming up on the second year soon.
We'll see how that goes in the future.
So Xander did touch on something though. So the thing about the expansion pack is the games that they've put out there for the most part for the DLC are the kind of games that I would most wonder about from a standpoint of backwards compatibility. Let's work under the assumption the hardware is compatible with it, both from an internal gut standpoint and for just a form factor. Like it's not such a radical departure from where Switch is that it would be weird for them to try to do it. Then the question would be, what lesson have they learned from the massive amount of value they've been able to extract from their back catalog on Switch? They have been able to resell a lot of games that were Wii U games. Now, granted, nobody played them on Wii U, but they've made a lot of hay with Wii U products. They've also made a lot of hay with GameCube stuff that they brought back and that they've remastered again, or Wii stuff. Like they've really leaned in to monetizing their old stuff. And if you back compat the Switch, where a lot of that stuff has sold very, very well, are you cutting yourself off from being able to sell people Smash again or Mario Kart 8 again? Probably, but if it's just a backwards compatible, and it's purely backwards compatible, it's not. We didn't do any kind of like weird make another version for this system. It's just the same code running on a different machine. That's also a thing. Like there's backwards compatibility, and then we're going to port all the stuff, and maybe it's an automatic port, maybe it's like, it does some weird stuff, but we're going to release a separate executable that was compiled differently for the system versus native backwards compatibility.
That you get to have for free if you already bought it earlier. I mean, I think that's the really, when we talk about backwards compatibility to the consumer, to the player, what that really means is I can play my old games that I already paid for on the new system. Right. And that's really important if It's really important if you have a lot of overlap where you don't want people to stop buying the software for the old platform just because a new one is out.
Right.
So I think that probably will be a factor with Switch and whatever comes after Switch, because it depends on the timing. But let's say the Switch successor comes out in the next couple of years. I think Switch is still going to be doing well enough that they're not going to want to undermine Switch software sales, even if the hardware will have slowed down by that point.
Well, and games already in development, it frees them up to continue to make projects right now for Switch, knowing that the Switch successor will be able to play them natively.
And on the other hand, it makes it helps a new platform kind of get its legs under it if the exclusive software for it is slow to come out, which is more likely to be the case if the old platform is still going really strong.
It seems less likely that you would, if you were to have the Switch successor, like support having Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and as well as Smash Ultimate. Like if you can play that on the very first day, and then I don't think that you're less likely to see them sell those games again as like a complete version with the DLC. If people, those games are very successful, I'm sure that they would sell okay, but if so many people already own them and then they pick up that new console and they can then start playing those what do they call it, evergreen titles right away, it's like then that really, I think it turns into a creative issue of like, okay, well, how do we sell something that's completely different? Like then you have to go to the game designers and have that discussion of like your next version in this franchise has got to be completely different because like people already own this and they're already able to play it day one.
Right. Like it might undermine your ability. And look, there will be a new Mario Kart on that system because
sure.
they would be insane not to. But the presence of the most robust Mario Kart in history probably by a factor of 2. And we talked about this with Smash Ultimate as well after all the DLC. Like, where the fuck do you go after everyone is here? Like, you can't go, now everyone is here and then some, because, 1, there's already a million licenses, and 2, you're kind of hitting the diminishing return standpoint. But you need to have something. Like, that needs to exist. So, I mean, it's the raison d'etre for the system, is to sell that software. So if you can't creative yourself out of that software hole you've put yourself in, then you may as well not make the system, because that's what makes the system make sense economically. So if the games are there, and like I said, they don't have to like there are things where it's the same code, but on a new system they just had to recompile them, just because the compiler that puts them into executables is different. If it's just straight up the exact same code, then I guarantee all your DLC stuff, including the Nintendo account stuff, carries over. And because it's the same executable. If they have to touch it, that might make things more difficult, because that means they're going to have to touch all of the games. And I think there's so many Switch games, even if you just limit yourself to Nintendo stuff, they probably don't want to do that. They probably don't want to have to touch everything. So like, if they're going to do it, it's going to be because it just, I'm going to air quotes this, it just works.
I just want to give one other perspective here, and I probably have flipped back and forth a couple times through this conversation as to whether I think this will happen or whether I care if it happens. But a lot of, as somebody who's been playing games my whole life, which is a long time now, I just have so many systems, so many games. Physically, they become a real problem over time. That's less so recently with digital storage. But I feel like the convenience factor of backwards compatibility is really diminished by having a system like Switch that's so small and self-contained already. You don't need a big case or a big crate to keep all your Switch gear in. I mean, for me, I've got one. It's got a couple controllers. It's really straightforward. The dock is even very small. So I guess from that perspective, if they said the next system is not backwards compatible, I think some people will care a lot, but me personally, I probably don't care that much because it's not a huge hassle for me to keep a Switch around.
I care more that there are a lot of Switch games that I kind of want to play, but whenever I've seen them played by other people, they don't look like they run really well. And when I try to play like games that I own that don't run well, it's like, well, I guess for what I want in the sequel, or if it's truly a sequel or whatever, their next project is, I just kind of want to be able to play the games that they've been making, and I'll also like be able to enjoy them in a way that they run well. Which I know it's the Switch Pro that everyone's been talking about for years now. I'm not here to say that it's a real thing or not, but
I just have no faith that Nintendo is going to do like Microsoft has done on the Xbox side and make older games run better on the newer hardware. That is technically feasible. It is really not the kind of thing Nintendo has ever dabbled in, and I don't
have that expectation.
Other than
That's just my desire.
Game Boy Color, adding color, a little bit. But
I mean, the new 3DS had stuff, and DSi had a couple things that performed better on that hardware,
like the shop.
Did they run better, or they just had exclusive titles? I don't remember games running. better.
The obvious example is Hyrule Warriors. Like it was very obviously not really ready for prime time on the old models, and the new 3DS is what actually made that game like something of a reasonable approximation of the Wii U game.
Yeah, but that's not really an example of what I'm talking about, because that game was developed with support for the new 3DS at the time. I'm talking about playing older games on newer hardware that wasn't even thought of.
But actually went
made.
back and improved it. That's the thing.
Yes.
Because backwards compatibility is one thing, but then that's like another layer again that I would be more surprised to see. Definitely.
Well, so and a lot of the Microsoft stuff is also running in an emulator. And,
right. Exactly.
Or they recompiled.
So is Nintendo Switch Online.
Like,
yeah.
Well, yeah, but like a lot of the Xbox One versions of Xbox or Xbox Series versions of Xbox One games, they recompiled the game and re-released it, and so that recompilation has different rendering targets and has different resolution outputs and stuff like that. So, like, if Nintendo has to do that, they could, but the thing to keep in mind is that a much bigger portion of Nintendo's core library is first party and is their responsibility than Microsoft had to deal with. So there could be some stuff there where it's like, eh. Now, if Nintendo has been putting like higher resolution configurations in their software just to future-proof it, then they might have that, but a lot of their stuff's been decompiled already, and I don't know that I've seen people really make a lot of references to that being there. They could do stuff where maybe if the new hardware was again software or internals compatible, externals compatible, essentially inputs outputs compatible, and had enough extra juice that maybe it could do some fancy up-resing stuff to make it look better. There are some systems on a chip that can do that for you. Like they literally take the video signal and do that separate from the primary processing.
Yeah, DLSS is one way to do that. And you know, there were Switch Pro rumors or whatever a couple years ago that were very focused on that feature being part of it. So that might be an elegant solution. I don't know how well that works broadly
and that
speaking.
Wouldn't solve frame rate things either. So like there might be some games that already have hooks in them to support this. Like I wouldn't be surprised at all if assuming this system is backwards compatible, if Tears of the Kingdom has all kinds of hooks just buried in it explicitly for a successor system.
Well, and they could patch, right? You can always go back and update games from before.
If there are certain games that you care about or are value, which they can just go look at their top 10 sellers and go, Mario Kart 8, well, it sold 80 million copies. It's worth doing the effort. You could drop a patch for those. But I wouldn't expect every game to do it natively.
What would they do about the Joy-Cons?
They should burn them in a fire.
I agree with you, but it's like that's kind of a problem when it comes to this backward compatibility topic, because then you have to bring that baggage with you. And if there's one thing that I think that they ditch with the next piece of hardware, it's the Joy-Cons, because that's been such a problem for them for so long now.
I only partially agree with that statement. So you can do what they tried to do with the Joy-Cons with different hardware guts that solve the capturing of motion differently. And in fact, there are kits out there right now to replace your Joy-Con sticks that don't use that same sensor technology that is prone to developing drift. And it develops drift on any system that uses that technology. It's a mechanical indicate it's a mechanical sensor, and anything mechanical in a system is ultimately going to break down eventually. It just so happens that because of the sensitivity that thing is trying to capture, capturing a lot of movement in a relatively minute range, that any kind of interference from loss of signal strength or loss of reliability or weird input outputs because of loss of function is going to represent in your gameplay. Like they could have at the time gone with a technology that's not as mechanical, like something that uses like a magnetic I'm blanking on it now.
Hall effect.
Yeah, like Hall effect sensing. And it was probably just a ruthless economic decision that was made when they went to the vendor to provide them with the sticks. And, when you do these kinds of cost-benefit analysis and go, we can go with that, that's probably got more reliability, or we can go with this, it's cheaper, you get it wrong sometimes. And they definitely got it wrong with the cost on the Joy-Con. I could see a Joy-Con-like thing that just solves the sensor. And then effectively they say, like, well, it's worth paying the extra because, one, we think this system will be successful, and we know the barrier or the heights that the system could reach are much higher than where we thought Switch could ever be, because Switch is definitely beyond that.
Yeah.
And two, the costs of it failing can be much higher than we ever contemplated they could be. And so they might make just different calculus and it works. But even if they don't, even if they say, like, controllers are what they are, they could still support backwards compatibility with the Joy-Cons. You could do this now if you have a Switch... I can't remember, the Switch Lite?
The Switch Lite, It's obviously, there's a built-in, control inputs rather than Joy-Con, but, the system could still have a wireless controllers, kind of sync up with it.
Right, so they could, if they wanted to say, hey, we're not doing the Joy-Con thing anymore, but we want the games to still be supported, that moves into that area I was talking about. We're like, well, hardware could get weird. But it would just be like the Wii remotes with Wii U. The Wii U could talk to your Wii remotes because fundamentally it was still there. It wasn't a natively supported thing. Like the Wii U didn't come with the Wii remote. They did sell Wii U branded Wii remotes, which was always a very weird looking thing.
Well, I just played into the unfortunate branding around that whole thing.
Oh yeah,
about it. Well, is it a separate system or isn't it? That's the first thing. That's the first thing that they need to kind of clean up. When there is, is it a successor? Is it a family of systems, like iteration thing? I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, what we could reasonably be assured is whatever plan they originally had in mind probably got completely disrupted by the pandemic. And how that manifests itself and what will come next now is interesting. Obviously, all these issues about like procurement for components, does that affect what kind of hardware
definitely.
They're willing to put together now? Like, is it more likely that they stick to something that's similar to what the Switch is because like that's going to be easier for them to procure or not? I have no idea. I couldn't even begin to tell you about that kind of thing. But that would strike me as one of the key dominoes in whether you'd get backwards compatibility, because I think the instinct would certainly be to have it, and I think there's more reason to have some of that carryover now that we do have the Nintendo account, and it's like, okay, well, if we maintain, because as we've said, the issue with some of these things is, do you do yourself out of sales by letting people bring over these sorts of perennial games to them? But now, more so than in the past, we can weigh that against something which is like, but if somebody is bringing with them their subscription to these other things, that comes with that, like the Switch Online and the expansion pack and whatever else might get added to this over time, well then, that's a revenue stream that we can maintain by, letting people know, like, this is something that's going to go with you from generation to generation, which is not really what they've done very much of in the past. There was a little bit of it with Wii and Wii U from the point of that you could transfer your virtual console games. And then, like, if you wanted to upgrade the quote unquote to
$1
the Wii U, a shop channel version of those, there was an additional kind of fee or whatever. But yeah, they haven't been that great about it in the past. So, but now that was obviously before they had these kinds of subscription services that were building up this revenue stream that, I think you've been trying to build it up. If you then say, oh, guess what, guys, this isn't backwards compatibility, that's going to be a huge setback for that, rather than like, okay, we just keep adding to this. This is a revenue stream that, we've been slow to monetize, frankly. If they're being honest, they're like, yeah, we dragged our feet on this. We didn't go for it the way that, other platform holders did, before us. But we've done it now. And now that it's here, we want to it needs to keep growing, right? That's the whole point. It's just going to, we like it as a baseline, as something that's just there, that's going to keep coming into the coffers, but it's got to keep growing. Rather than if you cut off back compat, you could have a real problem of like people do, oh yeah, I'm really willing to let it lapse now, and it'll have to shrink before maybe it grows back up again, as hopefully the new hardware that's a clean break actually gets bigger adoption. Don't see that as being very palatable myself, but we'll see.
I don't think that they start over completely. I think them going back to like square one, that doesn't seem like something that, based on what they've communicated so far, it doesn't seem like it's in their best interest. Their whole thing for the past half decade has been like getting you involved with the Nintendo account. They've got the mobile apps are very focused on that. They've got the subscription plans and the levels of the subscription plans now. I think even the app for the theme park, I think, ties into your Nintendo account now.
It does.
They're very focused on like once you're in the family, like you're gonna be a part of the snowball as we keep going forward. So with the Joy-Cons, they have quirks to them, but they really aren't that dissimilar to like, the Pro Controller is very similar to the Joy-Con. It's just, it doesn't have that snapping component to it. So they will likely, with each console, they design their software around the controller. So I could see them redesigning the controller for whatever their next project is. But to make it completely impossible for the Joy-Con to have any type of connection to whatever the next thing is, I don't think that's out of the realm. Obviously I don't know, but it seems like it would be easier than say like the Wii remote.
Well, yeah, they're Bluetooth controllers, right? So it's ultimately you don't even need a physical interface for the Joy-Cons to work with the new system. So I think you're right. At the same time, I gotta think that Nintendo being Nintendo, they understand that if they just release a more powerful version of basically the same concept, it's going to be confusing to people, but it's also going to be a little unsatisfying to people. And I feel like most of all, it'll be unsatisfying to Nintendo. Mm-hmm. And I have to think that backwards compatibility or not, let's assume they do that. Let's assume that the next system is in a lot of ways can do what the Switch does, right? But I feel like it has to have its own thing that very clearly sets it apart. Some kind of new feature. I don't know if
it's the raison d'etre, isn't it? Why do we need a new one of these?
Right.
And that's obviously was, with the Wii U, the gamepad and all that, and it was a spectacular failure, in terms of distinguishing it as a separate system that had backwards compatibility that you could use your Wii remote with, you could use your Wii disc with, but it's a new system. It can do HD. It can, it's much more powerful, all these things. But then also it has this new interface, and that's really the new thing about it, that's not just kind of, imitating either previous Nintendo devices or, the other HD consoles that already existed. And it was a total disaster. So we should not take for granted that it's like, okay, well, when you're doing whatever they're doing with Switch, like I said, you have to assume something that was more of a new 3DS type of thing could have been in their plans in the past few years and then has not been. So I guess the question arises then is like, do you ever circle back around to that idea, or just say, what, the time for that passed? We're in Switch's 7th year. If we were gonna do it, it would have been a few years ago. Circumstances didn't line up. That ship sailed. So now it's going to be a question of going to something that has to have that real reason to be that Johnny's talking about, and that's that raises questions then about, okay, well, if it's, you know, if you're genuinely trying to make something that makes it feel like this is novel, does it have an exclusive component, as in it excludes aspects of the previous hardware from the equation? That's hard to answer.
I'm wondering if the sequel is not too dissimilar of the Switch. Like, they're not going to let go of the portability. That's my assumption.
Oh, well, I think the primacy of, like, and obviously it's not the biggest market in the world, but it's still a reasonably sized market, and it's a big deal to Nintendo, probably, you know, bigger in some ways than just the, you know, the actual revenue would dictate. It's the Japanese market. You cannot seriously suggest that you want to maintain their position of near total dominance in that country and walk away from the portability factor.
I'm wondering if it's like when you dock it, like the dock itself is kind of like, because the Switch dock doesn't like improve its performance, right? For certain games,
it enables a higher power mode.
You get obviously outputs at higher resolutions, you know, in docked mode. Always,
I'm wondering if it's that again, but like they have a specific controller meant to be played when it's docked, and then like the Joy-Cons can be featured when it's docked, or you can take them with you if you'd like, and that way you can keep that portability. You can keep the Joy-Cons, but like then they have a hook of like, here's what makes it different. But then again, you know, you're starting to run into the conversation of, isn't that just what the Wii U is?
Well, honestly, I think if the successor to the Switch, it just doesn't need a dock. I mean, it could do the same thing and just plug it directly into the television. Like the dock is pretty superfluous at this point. But I do think that I would not completely rule out the idea of a TV only version of the Switch at some point, but I would see it as kind of like a late generation budget version that they would be able to sell for much lower price because it doesn't have a screen.
We've had that question in the past, like, would they ever do that? Because obviously they did the opposite with Switch Lite, and it's always interesting to me, even in Japan, how modest the sales of Switch Lite are. Like, it's not that popular.
The price difference just isn't significant. So, like,
it's not enough for the loss of functionality. Like, you'd rather just go and, you know, have the ability to play it on TV.
I have talked multiple people out of a Switch Lite because I'm like, look, you can get the real Switch for a marginal amount of money more, and even if you don't plan to ever dock it, at least you can.
Yeah.
And with the Joy-Con stuff, the Switch Lite uses the same sensors. At least you can just slip new Joy-Con into the thing and be done with it.
I really feel like if the Switch Lite had been more popular, they would have done an OLED version of that. Because in some ways it makes more sense. Like, yeah, if you're going to play on it all the time, you really need that screen to be better, right? But they haven't even done that because it just doesn't... Like, it's just an option there, you know, for people, but it's not like a primary option. And that's the point, like, what Johnny's talking about is the Switch Lite almost, I think, was that, even if they didn't necessarily intend it to be. Like, it's just like this, it's a cheaper option, but it's around, but it's not something that we're, like, pushing, you know, it just ended up being this, like, thing that's there that's not really a focus. And that usually is something that happens right at the end. You know, like, okay, what can we squeeze out of this? Like that red and black Wii that had, like, the Wi-Fi stripped out of it and all that kind of thing. Maybe the GameCube,
the one that looked like a hamburger box. Yeah,
that was one thing. And then, you know, like, there was a Super Famicom Junior or something, like, at the back end of that cycle. And this is something that happens quite a bit throughout sort of history. So, you know, you couldn't. I don't think you could rule that out, but in terms of the actual next core device, it seems clear to me that it would not be a Switch Lite that doesn't have TV capability, but it would also have to have portability as well. It would have to keep doing what they've been doing because it has been far too successful not to. Really, that is their kind of, especially with the Japanese angle. Like I said, I mean, again, you could argue they focus on it too much, given that the Japanese market is not the biggest thing in the world. But like the Wii U was such a let's solve Japan's not indifference to consoles approach, wasn't it? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, no, you don't have to be afraid of this console because it doesn't monopolize the one TV that's in a Japanese home or whatever. That is not a concern that anyone would have if they were preparing something exclusively for the American market. It just isn't.
In retrospect, it's kind of interesting that they never iterated on the Wii U, other than having like the one with like the slightly larger storage, but like the Wii,
which was instant, right? Like
right.
They iterated on it by buying them out of stores. That was how they iterated.
No, it didn't.
Get it the fuck off shelves.
But I mean, like the Game Boy, the DS, the 3DS, the Wii, the Switch, all of them had iterations of some component. A lot of them to make them more accessible for kids.
Far more successful products.
Yeah, so you know what? Didn't have an iteration, the Virtual Boy, and that sadly is the Wii U is not nearly that. It had way more games. There were like 14 million people or so that had them, whereas Virtual Boy was 500,000, or whatever.
Be nice. He's right there.
Wouldn't you okay, the Wii U's not doing well. Well, let's create like an iteration of it, and then we'll rebrand that one. It'll be like our second attempt with this. You know what I mean?
I think it was that bad that it became a question of this is throwing good money after bad, very quickly.
Okay.
If you could put the Nintendo executives who were around at that point in truth serum situation, and just straight up ask them, what did you think was going to happen when you launched this? I bet you would get a certain amount of trepidation as the response. Because we talked about it on the show at the time. We felt very uncertain about the Wii U when they showed it. And we felt very uncertain about it as it was coming out. And we felt like the value proposition didn't feel right. The system didn't feel desirable.
I would just point to the software lineup at the Wii U launch. It speaks volumes.
I remember being an angry teenager when I found out about the Wii U because I was like, what? I don't want that. It's a weird looking controller. I just want to be able to play the game. So I didn't get one, not even realizing that it was a new console. I just thought it was a weird thing. I was one of those people that just thought it was a mini Wii to play your games on. And I was like, no. I like using my Wii remotes in front of the TV. So I didn't get one until I found out what it was. And it was in 2015 when they came out with Mario Maker.
Which is the kind of thing it should have launched with.
Right.
Because I don't know that would have made a difference because I think fundamentally the Wii U had more problems than just its
we had an email that was literally about time travel and what would it have taken to fix or save the Wii U, which we're getting perilously close to answering here.
But, I think it's more than just software.
I do think it's more the software, but Johnny's right. The software was an issue, and a lot of that, it seemed to me, was they completely misjudged the cycle in that, they thought Wii was going to keep selling nicely for a while and that they wouldn't have to replace it when they did end up replacing it, and the bottom fell out way faster than they imagined, and they're like, whoa, shit. We're going to have to bring these plans forward, and they were not in any, look, hey, sometimes scrambling Nintendo, surprisingly successful and effective. The Nintendo DS says hello, but not on that occasion. It really wasn't. Now, we don't... Switch has already had a very sort of long and prosperous life, to be honest. But, obviously we've reached the point where the hardware sales certainly have softened a fair bit. You can see that in various places year on year. I think in this year in the UK to this point, I think hardware sales, are down something like, 30% or something like that. It's similar in Japan as well. Now, again, this is to be expected at this stage, frankly, especially given the rather limited
this is
amount
late.
of different variations. You know what I mean? I mean, a lot of Nintendo systems that have been successful enough to last this long, as Xander already kind of alluded to, had way more different versions of them, you know, to kind of gin up sales and was lower price in the first place so that you would get more repeat purchases for people who are like, yeah, I'll have another DS. You know, yeah, I already had a DS Fat at launch day. I had a DS Lite, but screw it, I'll have a DSi XL. You know, I want a big one. Fine, you know, like, but the Switch is not like, because there's been, you know, the kind of, oh well, there's the Switch Lite and there's it had slightly better battery life when they just did a kind of like, you know, slight change of the components, and then there's the OLED, but it's all, you know, a bit expensive for those sorts of purchases. So I think the sales have been kind of surprisingly resilient given the fact that, you know, they haven't had that many iterations, given how expensive it is, all these things. But there still is the possibility that it's like it will, you know, take what, sometimes it just, when it happens, it's quite sudden that it's just, nah, you know what, people have, it's kind of reached saturation and quicker than you thought, and now you're going to move on. I hope they're better prepared for that, frankly, now with this incredibly successful system than they were with Wii and DS.
One worry I have though is that they don't have an idea for what to do, and like that's not like a huge deal, but like, you know, Nintendo's a very creative company. You know, they're software engineers. They definitely put their heart into their work, and so if they don't have a piece of hardware that they can design their games around, you know, that's going to reflect in the software library itself. You can call it a safe sequel, fine, but you know, I think some of their best gaming experiences are designed around when they get kind of weird in a good way, for better or for worse.
Well, you know, I think we should probably wrap, because at this point we don't know what the Switch
we don't know, but it bears restating in some sort of pithy way.
Right.
Play the alarm.
Some kind of new alarm that I may or may not craft for this episode. We'll see.
I am disappointed though that there isn't a timeline where RFN had to go through a conversation about like the Wii U XL, the Wii U Lite, like whatever weird naming convention they came up with.
I'm fine having not had to have had that conversation.
It was certainly floated to, you know, at some point, at least briefly. You know, we certainly talked a lot about multi-gamepad games and stuff like that.
Well, that felt like another thing that they probably did have some sort of like legit plans for at some point.
Sure,
but again, when it became a question of like, no, this thing is cooked. There's no point like spending more on, you know, further researching how to, you know, add functionality or make it more appealing, because it isn't going to get any more appealing. We need to start thinking about the next thing. You know, if it hadn't been so obviously a poor performer, you know, you might have seen some of those things. But they recognized it relatively quickly, but it still took years to kind of, you know, dig themselves out of that pit that the Wii U's very bad debut can put them in. I will just say, to circle it back to the very, very initial premise of the question, I will be disappointed if it doesn't have it.
Yes,
I won't be disappointed if it doesn't, you know, kind of like, oh, like you're playing Yoshi's Crafted World and it's higher resolution now. Like that would be more of a surprise. That would be more of a, you know, a pleasant surprise. But to not have it at all, I would be disappointed.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, I want to wrap the show up with the. We'll keep it pretty brief because it's a 3-minute trailer. Like, I don't want us to sit here and do the 6.5-hour video cut of breaking down this trailer. I'm sure there's already 9 of those on YouTube somehow, even though the trailer just can't. There's a video longer than the amount of time between now and when the trailer released breaking down this thing somehow. But
I made that video for the Origami King a few years ago. Yeah,
like there's so much stuff in this. Like if you sit there and pay attention to it, that it will it would fill all of your like secret lore of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I mean, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom final trailer video needs. So we're not going to try to go down that road because one, we haven't I think I'm the only person here who's seen it twice. Xander hasn't seen it at all.
I watched it twice because the first time was on my phone. So
Okay,
I wanted
fair.
to watch it on a larger screen before the show.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to talk about it. I just was like, well, I've already pre-ordered it. Nintendo tends to like show off too much right before the game comes out, so I'll just hold off.
Yeah, so I think I'm just going to kind of roll this on vibes, just to give enough basic premise, and that's not going to freak anybody out about spoilers and stuff. Basically,
Oh my gosh,
it
Link's
very
in
much
it?
Link is in it. A character talks. It very much follows the beat pattern of the famous Breath of the Wild trailer, to the point where it's not a shot-for-shot remake like a certain Arceus trailer that literally had like walking out of the cave animation. It was wild.
Yeah, you do feel that someone somewhere at Nintendo has like canonized that trailer. You know, what I
This
mean?
is
It's
the
like,
format.
This is how you do it, boys. This from now on.
There's like a how-to book for dummies like on the shelf.
It's just a sketch with like generic human shapes. It's just like, okay, this is where you see this is when they enter it. 10 seconds elapses. Here's the slow motion. Cut. Music sting. Cut. Music sting. Like it's really formulaic. And this is another one of those. It doesn't hit for me, and we'll ask around. It doesn't hit for me the same way as that Zelda one, the first Zelda one did, because of course it was the first. It was that whole format was new, and that Link was new, and that world was new. But I don't know, like what is that? Am I being fair to this trailer? Like
I'd say so for the most part.
Yeah, I don't know that you need to be fair to the trailer, but
am I representing it fairly? Let's put it that way.
yeah, I think so. I mean, to me, it is. It was very welcome. In a lot of ways, it feels like this could have been the first trailer they showed for Tears of the Kingdom, like a year ago or 6 months ago, rather than just a few weeks before the game launches. So it's an interesting way that they've rolled out the reveal of this game. But my takeaway from this final trailer is that, this looks more to have the kind of scope of Breath of the Wild than I expected. Because they've focused so much on the mechanics so far, and they've shown so little story or other characters or anything like that. Fairly small amount of variety of environments as well, because I think they didn't want to give away too much of the kinds of places that you might go. And in this trailer, we see a lot more of that diversity, and it looks to me like it has at least as much character interaction, at least as much narration, voiceover, variety of different kinds of places that you might be going and solving puzzles and such. It seems to have at least as much as Breath of the Wild, just from the smattering of the trailer. So I guess to me, this just cements that this is a full-ass Zelda game. It's not some weird experimental thing where they're gonna, do a Majora's Mask where they reuse some of the assets and then just go as far as they can out in some weird gameplay direction and not, don't worry so much about the things that you would normally expect to see. I saw a lot of things in this trailer that I would expect to see in any Zelda game, certainly any modern Zelda game. And I guess that's comforting. I haven't taken a lot of time to process how I feel about that. I mean, it certainly hyped me up plenty. I already had tons of hype for this game, and it looks like it's going to be a massive experience.
They showed a lot of, in this trailer, there was a lot of fast cutting. There was a lot of like blink and you'll miss it stuff. And that's been a trend that they've been doing with trailers for this game pretty much since Zero. And there was one shot in particular where it's Link on the hang glider again, because that's in the first game's trailer. And there's all kinds of stuff you can, if you really dig on it, you can look and you can see things are happening. And we saw a little bit of an area that is an area I recognize from the previous game, but it is fundamentally changed. It seems like there's stuff going on, and they featured people more than that trailer did. 'Cause of course, there are people in that world, but they're very much, because of the shitty nature of the world in Breath of the Wild, they're very much confined to the margins. Like they're off in a handful of pockets where they are safe.
I have a question in regards to the trailer since I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Is it a lot of just like you said it's fastly edited? Is it a lot of like cinematic shots where like you can tell this is a cut?
There's a lot of that, but
my okay, well, gosh, I hate ever like risking raining on anyone's parade or sound like a contrarian, but the only concern I have with that is that as cool and like epic as the like final presentation trailer for Breath of the Wild was, I have always felt that it's not the best showcase of what the game actually is. It's a lot of like cool moments from the brisk story that game has, edited with music that's not from the game, but is a really cool like remix or your orchestration of the Zelda theme. Just to kind of, it's a hype trailer, you know? And so my only concern with that is like, is this going to be a repeat of that? Like, is this all like stuff that you'll encounter in the game for sure, but like, it's not going to be this level of engagement.
It is definitely not the majority of your game time. It is definitely, I have absolute confidence that ultimately the majority of the time the average player spends with this game is still going to be fuck around time.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, that's the point. We already kind of, you have to think of this as a sort of companion piece to the gameplay video. Right. The 10 minutes of, oh, look, I can...
And there's still a minute of gameplay stuff in this trailer.
Yeah, really. There's definitely moments of, like, showing, just sort of hinting at what you can do with some of these new powers that Link has, amidst the, the kind of cutscene glimpses and whatnot. But
there's a rocket. He attaches to a rocket.
Yeah, he has a rocket. It's so weird.
So yeah, I didn't even watch the gameplay one.
He
so
pulls
I just
a horse-drawn carriage.
I assumed it was more of Breath of the Wild, but with new mechanics. So I mean, which is fine by me. It sounds great, and I loved Breath of the Wild.
The point is that they kind of that video kind of covered the remember all the sort of kind of player-driven, kind of self-created things that were emerged out of Breath of the Wild. Well, you've got this whole new toolkit to do far more kind of crazy stuff, basically, in this game, which, again, is probably going to be a lot of, how people spend time with the game in practice and a lot of what gets shared online of, when it hits the public. But this is the other side of the coin, which is, okay, it's got, like Link going from one side of a body of water to the other on a cobbled together raft is not generally thought of as very epic. And so this is substituting for the Legend of Zelda. It's got to be epic. Well, here's your epic right in your face right now. Bang, 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 bang.
Here's Buff Ganon.
So, yes, that's he's
sweet.
He's looking better than he did 4 years ago in that E3 trailer.
Is the rehydrated meme a real thing now?
He's straight up. People cycle on test. Nah, he's not cycling. He's just on all the time.
He's built on Tren. He's got all the Deca.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no cycling in his bloodline. It's just all the time on. He's massive. But I think that's it. Like, this is the hype trailer. There's a lot of, you're right. That trailer for Breath of the Wild, I feel like it had a clip from almost every cutscene in the game because there aren't that many.
It's I mean, if you want to be sort of really kind of uncharitable, you could say it's almost dishonest. What I mean? It's like it's not representative of.
I would say that. I just don't want to I don't want to get anyone mad.
I think the thing this trailer did though is I always felt like there was this weird concern that if it's taking place in the same world, it's not going to have much to. It's not going to be like exploring the place. But it's like, well, they obviously can change the world even if it's the same geographic stuff.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that.
And we saw some of that. We saw that the floating space is huge. We saw that in one of those 2 trailers ago. We saw it again. They keep reinforcing that. There's a lot of floating island space. But they showed an area, and I won't go into what area it was. They showed an area from the first game, but there's people there now because people couldn't go there before.
Yeah,
a
certain length of time has passed and a certain amount of rebuilding has happened, presumably.
Right.
But while, the Calamity Ganon was gone, but Ganondorf hadn't come back yet. So yeah, we've got I don't know how long that was, obviously yet,
Right.
but long enough for some significant kind of changes to certain places, I guess.
And like they could very easily have the weather, the climate, and all that other stuff could change on an area that's got a geographic like. They've eliminated the element of evil. Like they could just say like, yeah, this area that was cold's not cold anymore because Ganon's gone.
Well, I mean, obviously they did that in sort of microcosm in Majora's Mask. Each of the regions had a curse on it from Skull Kid. When you beat the boss of the dungeon, it changed the environment and it made it so you could go certain places. It obviously affected the schedules of the characters in question and they made certain quests completable. So you could be that on a very much bigger scale, from game to game.
Yeah. So I'm like, there definitely seemed to be a part of this trailer that was intending to allay that fear. There's definitely a component in there that's like, no, we've got bosses. Look at this thing. Or we got a snapshot of some big scary looking thing that isn't just a Ganon form. Doing a wake up animation and then again a quick cut. Like it was like the animation of a boss coming to life and they're like, all right, cut away, next thing. And there were, when they did the standard Link flying into the screenshot, which is a requisite for these trailers, they did this time show, in Breath of the Wild, there was the shrines and you could see the glowing circle around them. They did have glowing indicators, like things that were glowing in the distance that you could see on the map, but they didn't drill into what those were. So some kind of mechanism, potentially shrine-like. It did feel like there was a lot of like, hey, we're trying to answer questions people have, but not just like, here's the old Nintendo way of, here's a list of bullet points we're going to email you that answers these questions.
When they showed off Breath of the Wild years ago, I feel like the bullet point that they wanted to hit home is that you can go anywhere, do anything at any time. Is that bullet point at the forefront of this one, or do they seem to be telling you a different story?
I think they probably just feel like they don't have to say it. What they've been showing instead is, here is what seems to be a wildly unlimited toolkit. And a lot of locomotion is the function of that toolkit. And so Link can be moved around by his toys in different ways. I would guess because Breath of the Wild was so deeply played by so many people, and that core message of go anywhere and do things in whatever order you want and whatever, is part of the energy of that game. They probably don't feel like they have to talk about that as much. They can just instead show the things that you can use to affect that kind of do whatever you wantness.
Sounds like a creativity mode, like something like akin to Minecraft or something, where you have a space, like here are a bunch of toys, like go do it. Like when Breath of the Wild came out, you saw those videos of people making makeshift creations out of like the mine carts and stuff, like hovercrafts and such. Like they probably saw that and were like, we gotta like do more of that and give it to people.
There are other people in the trailer who are not Link, who are interacting with, I will call them curiously designed vehicles. Vehicles that are of questionable merit and I would say in at least some cases seem extremely top-heavy. So obviously the world has changed pretty fundamentally, but yeah, like they're basically saying like you can go wherever you want, you could do stuff without having to say it, because that was such a new thing in that Zelda game. They did need to just hammer it home.
That's interesting, because it's like if they're giving you a bunch of toys just for you to kind of have fun with in like this sandbox Zelda, like do you then take parts of those toys and use them as like your classic items that you'd get like in a dungeon, and then design the dungeon around each one? Okay.
But they haven't even shown us that there are dungeons. So like it's all TBD on that front. They seem quite content to not give that away. Now granted, that will be revealed in 3 weeks when reviews come out.
I mean, there's some footage in the trailer that is very dungeon-y, but there's certainly, you don't have the context to know, are these more divine beasts? Are these shrines? Are they more akin to traditional Zelda dungeons? Are they something completely new that they've come up with here? we don't really know. But there are interior locations that look puzzle heavy.
Right, and you could have given that same impression using a mix of the shrines and the castle from Breath of the Wild. So it's like, it feels like the more you know about Breath of the Wild, the less certainty you'll feel coming out of this trailer.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're coming at it from the outside and don't have that haven't gone through that Breath of the Wild experience, you might be like, oh, that's dungeon. Obviously,
well,
that's
again,
a boss.
it just goes back to the nature of a trailer like this when you're talking about a game that, just in the case of Breath of the Wild, is this vast experience that had lots of different facets to it that, when you can just take these very brief glimpses and cut them together, it can create an impression that it's not actually like that it's not in the game, but it might not be entirely representative of what the game is.
It's not the focus.
So again, you may have that at play with this, but I think it's mostly just kind of almost like firing a starting pistol, like the final month run-in to Tears of the Kingdom is now on. Everybody, put yourself into your final stage of Hype Machine, because it's coming, and it's going to be every bit as epic as you hope for it to be. It's all about epic.
Blades will bleed, Goombas will twerk. It'll be great.
That's the watchword, I think, with that. I'm sure there's probably earlier cuts of this trailer that may have got another pass because someone said it wasn't quite epic enough yet.
I can absolutely believe that. I think we're going to call it there. Jonny, Xander, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Jonny, is there anything you want to share with people that they could find you?
I'm still tweeting despite better judgment, probably. And I just want to say I'm glad to be here on the 62nd anniversary of human spaceflight.
Oh, nice. Xander, what about you?
I don't tweet very much. I am on Twitter. My handle on most things is Morning Shark, if you are interested in hitting me up. But I'm not as online as I used to be. I think really Mario Party Monthly has been my only presence lately, which is a good and bad thing, I guess, depending on how you look at it. So we typically will stream on NWR's Twitch on the first Friday or Saturday of the month.
What's the address of NWR's Twitch?
It's like twitch.com/ Nintendo World Report, something like that.
Negative. That's an NO.
All right.
It's twitch.tv / Nintendo World Report.
All right, twitch.tv, not .com. Sorry. I'm a guest on that because I'm not like an NWR staff member anymore, but I help out a lot.
I mean, there's not a ton of people who are regularly on there, so like you're in that grand scheme of things, you're on there quite a bit compared to most NWR people.
Yeah, James is very kind. He usually frequents watching us torture ourselves. So if you need an RFN face to be familiar with, he might be there.
And also disrupt. Keep in mind, my primary function there is to seed chaos.
Which is funny because I think of anyone else there, I'm the one that's trying to keep the boat from sinking completely. Especially when we get on the topic of VTubers like that. Oh man, I tell you,
I'm really mad we didn't manage to pull that for April Fool's Day episode. I still think that was there and the play was right, and it would have been perfectly stupid. But what did y'all do? If people want to go watch Mario Party Monthly, what did y'all do for April?
We played Pac-Man Fever, a iconic video game, up there with the best of them.
So bad.
It's pretty bad. It's
It's bafflingly bad.
Yeah. Imagine you create mini games and like you section them off depending on what board you're at, and so you can only play like 15 or 20 of the pool of mini games.
Was it even that?
Maybe.
A very small number.
I think I might be generous, but we play Mario Party, and on April Fool's Day, we will typically, or really for the month of April, we'll pick another board game to take a stab at. And it's not just us playing Mario Party. There's like some competition that makes it kind of exciting to watch. Whoever comes in first place gets to pick a video game for the loser who comes in fourth place to have to stream for an hour. And sometimes they can get pretty ruthless, I gotta tell you.
Fucking dinosaur from from the Chrome I don't have internet screen
Yeah.
for an hour. That stream was a nightmare.
Yeah, I really hit the karma bullet on that one. That was my doing. Yeah, I've learned from my mistakes. Next time will be better.
God. All right. Well, Greg.
Yes.
What music are we going to close the show out with?
Well, I had a request in alongside a bunch of Wind Waker retroactive thoughts that we may well get to when we close that out in a few weeks. From AG, talking about a bunch of songs from Theatre Rhythm. Final Bar Line, I believe, is the full title for the Switch, Theatre Rhythm. So lots of not just Final Fantasy choices, there's one from Romancing Saga here, for instance, but lots of Final Fantasy choices for me to sort of pick from among. And then, of course, there's the fact that a few days after this episode goes out, the Pixel remasters will finally arrive on Switch for Final Fantasies 1 through 6. So yes, we are in Switch's 7th year, but we are finally going to get these games on Switch. I don't know whether that is means I should hold out hope or give up on Symphony of the Night coming to Switch. It's been so many years.
It's gonna happen, Greg.
I keep wanting it, but
it's inevitable.
But at least Final Fantasy that day is here. But the one I picked out from the list, because it ties into the Pixel remasters that AG picked out, was Library of Ancients from Final Fantasy V. And of course, it's worth mentioning in the Pixel remasters, you do have kind of a choice of the original, kind of chiptune soundtracks for the system in question, whether it's Famicom or Super Famicom, and then a kind of rearranged version. And I listened to both for this track in question, but I decided to go with the Super Famicom original on this here. But it sounds like they're pretty sort of straight, but also reasonably effective kind of rearrangements from what I've heard of those different versions. And this, as I've said before, Final Fantasy V probably be the Pixel remaster I'll investigate first of the bunch.
Cool. All right. Well, on that, it is time for us to go. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Do you want to skip Ghost Trick, or do you want to talk about it?
I can talk about it if you'd like. I mean, I've kind of been chatting, so I don't want to eat up.
Let me see what we're at. Yeah, we're at 128. Let's go ahead and call it there. Cool. All right, let me update my notes real quick.
And James will have to talk to Ghost Trick another day.
Yeah, play fucking Ghost Trick. Play fucking Ghost Trick.
I'm glad I did, man. I'm glad I did. You recommended it, and I did it. And it was.
I'm gonna keep saying it. Play Ghost Trick.
It's a great game.
It's really good. Another of my 3-day reviews, but a lot less painful.